Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. 2024 is already off to a very busy start. I want to begin by addressing the shocking actions and lack of transparency from the Department of Defense. It is absolutely unacceptable that the Pentagon waited multiple days to notify the President of the United States, the National Security Council, and the American people that Defense Secretary Austin was hospitalized and unable to perform his duties. I represent Fort Drum, home of the most deployed division in the U.S. Army since 9/11. There are currently thousands of 10th Mountain Division soldiers deployed in the Middle East. And while those brave service members were under attack by Iranian-backed terrorists, the Secretary of Defense was in the ICU, the Deputy Secretary of Defense was on vacation, and Joe Biden and the White House were completely unaware. In the chain of command, the Secretary of Defense serves as the connection through which the President commands and controls our armed forces. There will be a congressional investigation already launched by HASC Chairman Mike Rogers into this dangerous dereliction of duty, and there must be full accountability, beginning, I believe, with the immediate resignation of Secretary Austin and anyone who lied for him. I now want to turn our attention to Joe Biden's border crisis, which continues to be the #1 concern, certainly of constituents in my district, and one of the top concerns of Americans across the country. Last week, over 60 House Republicans went to Texas, led by the Speaker of the House, to see firsthand the catastrophe that Joe Biden's open border policies have created. And it's not just in Texas. In upstate New York, where my district shares a border with Canada, overworked Border Patrol agents are being overwhelmed there by a flux of illegal immigrants from 79 different countries, just recently apprehending an Iranian national with clear terrorist ties. Since Joe Biden stepped into the Oval Office, there have been over 8 million illegal crossings. Last month, more than 300,000 illegal immigrants poured into our country, setting the record for the most monthly encounters in history. As President Ronald Reagan historically said, quote, "A nation that cannot control its borders is not a nation," end quote. Every day that Joe Biden and Secretary Mayorkas refuse to secure our borders, they fail the American people, sacrificing our nation's safety, security, and sovereignty. And while Joe Biden and Democrats refuse to act, House Republicans have taken action, passing the strongest border security bill in American history, H.R. 2, the Secure the Border Act, and we voted for significant year-over-year funding increases for our courageous Border Patrol and ICE agents. As we speak, House Republicans on the Homeland Committee are beginning the impeachment process of Secretary Mayorkas for refusing to do his job and refusing to uphold the law. Good morning, everyone. First, I want to take a moment to congratulate President Donald Trump on his historic win in Iowa, earning more votes than all the other candidates combined. The people of Iowa spoke loudly and clearly, echoing the sentiment felt throughout the rest of the country. America is rallying in support of President Trump to save America and fire Joe Biden. Yesterday, I had the honor of meeting with Israeli Ambassador Herzog. This past Sunday marked 100 days since the Hamas terrorist attacks against Israel, the bloodiest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. House Republicans will continue to stand unequivocally with Israel. House Republicans passed a robust aid package under Speaker Mike Johnson's leadership, and yet Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer continue to fail to deliver support to our most precious ally. This week, House Republicans will welcome hundreds of thousands of our constituents proudly participating in the March for Life. The most important and meaningful title I have ever had in my life is Mom. We will continue to fight every day to ensure every baby has the sacred opportunity of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Unfortunately, life is under constant attack by radical far-left Democrats. There have now been over 88 recorded acts of violence and intimidation against pregnancy centers, churches, and pro-life organizations by far-left activists. These facilities were set ablaze, defaced, and vandalized. And what have we heard from Joe Biden and Democrats in Washington? Silence. Under the leadership of House Republicans, we passed the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act and a resolution condemning attacks on these pro-life facilities, groups, and churches following the Dobbs decision. In continuation of our commitment to defending life, this week House Republicans will bring to the floor the Pregnant Students' Rights Act and the Supporting Pregnant and Parenting Women and Families Act to support critical pregnancy resource centers and provide necessary information to pregnant students, combating manipulation by the far left's radical pro-abortion agenda. With that, I am honored to introduce one of my colleagues and friends and another mom in Congress, Ashley Hinson from the great state of Iowa, to discuss her bill on the floor this week. Ashley.
Then they're living in the middle of the streets, and it's a horrible scene. And Elise became very famous because she took on the heads of MIT and Penn and Harvard and did it in a surgical way. Wasn't it beautiful? And, you know, she was a great student. I think she went to Harvard. She was a great student at Harvard. And she's brilliant, and Lee's brilliant. Lee's a brilliant lawyer. And they traveled a long way to be here. If you don't mind, I'd just like to have them come up and be acknowledged, all right? Elise and Lee Zeldin.
Are we ready to make history, New Hampshire? Are we ready to make America great again? Are we ready to elect President Donald J. Trump and fire Joe Biden? Yes, we are. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Thank you for staying out in the cold. And I am just so honored to be here, and I'm proud to be the first member of Congress to endorse President Trump for re-election. And I'm excited to bring up my friend and our amazing, amazing former congressman and our amazing candidate for governor in New York State, Lee Zeldin.
Is New Hampshire ready to put President Trump back in the White House? We have a country to save. And when we vote for President Trump, we are voting to secure our border. When we vote for President Trump, we are voting for an economy that would be stronger than ever. We are voting for a foreign policy that is more effective. We are voting for parental rights and a higher quality education inside of our schools. When we vote for President Trump, we are doing it for our veterans, our military, our law enforcement, our firefighters. We do it for our flag, our freedom, and our future. We are doing it. We're voting for President Trump to make America great again. Let's get it done on Tuesday. Let's get it done in November. God bless all of you, and thank you for supporting this great president.
That was pretty good, huh? On day one of my new administration, I will seal the border. I will shut down the invasion of millions and millions of people who are pouring into our country. 3 years ago, we had the most secure border in U.S. history. We built 561 miles of border wall. And with the help of Mexico, we did a job that nobody's ever done before. We had it done. You know,
Chairwoman Elise Stefanik.
Let's give a round of applause for Caroline.
It is so great to be here in New Hampshire. Look at this energy, look at this enthusiasm. I'm so proud that you're in support of President Trump. And I will tell you, this is the most important election of our lifetime, isn't it? We need to defeat Joe Biden this November. And that starts right here in New Hampshire. We need to build on the momentum in Iowa. We are so proud that President Trump won by the largest margin ever in a Republican primary. And I know that New Hampshire is going to get this done. I know that voters are going to turn out in support of President Trump. And I just want to say, being here in New Hampshire, it reminds me so much of my district in upstate New York. I was saying to some of the wonderful volunteers and supporters here today, I'm used to the snow, I'm used to the cold, hardy people, pro-America people, America first people. This is Trump country. Just like Saranac Lake, yes, I know we have a couple New Yorkers here. That's great. Great upstaters here. Let me talk about about the issues at stake this election cycle. So we have seen the crises because of Joe Biden's failed presidency, the weakest president in my lifetime and in history. We see the border crisis. It is raging. You have a wide open border, and it is an economic crisis, a national security crisis, and a humanitarian crisis because of Joe Biden. And we're a border district in my district, and this is a border state as well. I see the heads nodding. I represent the Swanton sector, which covers New Hampshire. Our Border Patrol officers on the northern border have been transferred over and over again to the southern border because of Joe Biden's policies. We've seen a 550% increase of illegal crossings on the northern border in the Swanton sector. We've seen terrorists on the terror watch list who have crossed not only the southern border, but the northern border as well. We know what works. President Trump's border policies work. We need to build the wall. We need to end the release. We need to restore the Remain in Mexico policy. We know we have And on top of the border crisis, we see the pain of Bidenomics every single day. Hardworking families, small businesses, family farms are struggling because of the catastrophic Biden inflation, the highest rate of inflation in my lifetime. We see it in our home heating bills and utility bills, which have skyrocketed under Joe Biden. We know that under President Trump we had energy independence. That's what we need to return to. We are also seeing, and this is truly unprecedented, the weaponization of the federal government against Joe Biden's top political opponents. They're doing everything that they do against President Trump. Look at how they are illegally shredding the Constitution. They're trying to remove President Trump from the ballot in multiple states. You see them witch hunt after witch hunt. We see in my home state of New York these radical district attorneys, radical prosecutors going against President Trump. And why are they doing that? They're doing it because they know that Donald J. Trump, President Trump, is going to win and beat Joe Biden. President Trump is fighting for you. He's fighting for the American people, because it's not just President Trump that the corrupt Department of Justice is going after. It's parents, it's conservatives, it's Catholics. They are shredding the rule of law, and it's up to the American people to save this country, and we will do that by electing President Trump this November. Yes. I also want to thank the volunteers. You are the heartbeat of every campaign. I know Caroline knows this. As a Granite Stater, I know this. We are so proud of our grassroots volunteers every single day. I know you love Trump, and he feels the love every single day. We are so grateful. You are the backbone of this campaign, and I know there have been millions of voter contacts fueled by volunteers and supporters in New Hampshire. You have knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors in the cold. That hard work is going to pay off, because in New Hampshire, we know that we cannot have a Republican nominee that relies on never-Trumpers for vote. We know we cannot have a Republican nominee who, as governor, raised the gas tax. We know we cannot have a Republican nominee who bowed to China, selling off her land in South Carolina to communist China. We need America first. We need President Trump. We need to get this done right here in New Hampshire. Thank you so much.
sentence as Vice President?
I am so excited to be here today in New Hampshire. I am very used to this. This is very similar to my district. The Cole, you have so many hardworking volunteers who have been knocking on doors, who have been making millions of phone calls, and you can feel the energy and momentum in support of President Trump and the America First movement. We had a great rally last night in Concord. It was great to see my friend Senator Tim Scott endorse President Trump. It was great to be there with my former colleague Lee Zeldin. We were honored to be called by President Trump on stage, and you just see again the momentum, and the people are going to deliver this victory in support of Donald Trump. And I laid out the stakes right there. People understand that we have seen so many crises and just failure and weakness under Joe Biden. We have seen historic inflation, sky-high utility bills, home heating oil with the state legislation. We've seen weakness around the world, catastrophic the Middle East, our most ally Israel under attack, all on the line is March, and we see a border that is wide open, that is served every state in New Hampshire, including the state of New York, as well as a few more southern states into border states because of Joe Biden's policy. These volunteers have worked so hard, and I'm so excited to call voters with them, and I'm happy to take questions. Well, President Trump, I stand by. There is a lot of back and forth going on, but I'll tell you what's unacceptable. Nikki Haley has been disloyal to President Trump. She's been disloyal to American people. On the issues related to election integrity, Nikki Haley was shut down. That's why someone's going to close out of New Hampshire. We are in such a strong position in support of President Trump.
Both you and Jim Scott. Answer your question?
Right now, there's so much work to do. That's why I'm getting on the phone calling for and we have a lot to do in House Republicans who will provide the accountability now and next November when we're going to elect President Trump to the White House and we're going to win back the United States Senate and grow our majority in the House.
Congressman, to answer your question? To answer your question, you mentioned the swampy sector.
Yes.
Governor Christopher's talked a lot about the problem with the border before he was campaigning with the Haley, obviously a big issue. Could you talk about why that's important at the border? Did you see the story of Boston of ICE detainer being rejected by a local judge, someone who accused of raping someone who was mentally disabled and set free in ICE because the ICE detainer was rejected?
Yes, I have heard that story. It just highlights the liability that is literally impacting people's lives, impacting people's safety. Across the border, just in New Hampshire and North Carolina, we have seen that 550% increase. And I'll tell you, there is an impact in communities that is so negative. Right around Christmas time, in upstate New York, there's a 13-year-old undocumented illegal woman who crossed the border and was found both with a humanitarian crisis as well as an choose victory. They chose Iowa and New Hampshire. No Republican challenger against an incumbent Democrat president has ever done that. And President Trump is against Iowa to win both Iowa and New Hampshire is a huge, huge win. And I've already called on the other candidates to drop out. They should have dropped out months ago. And we're going to rally around the support of President Trump.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to stand here with my colleagues to highlight the border crisis, which is the top issue across the country. The numbers do not lie. Our country is being invaded right now, right in front of our very eyes, because of Joe Biden's catastrophic border policies. Just last month, over 300,000 illegal immigrants came across our southern border, the largest amount in a single month in history. 19 of those individuals were arrested for being on the terrorist watch list, not to mention the countless unknown gotaways. Texas is the first line of defense against this full-fledged invasion at our southern border, as Joe Biden and Secretary Mayorkas refuse to enforce our laws by rolling out the red carpet for illegal immigrants. Texas not only has the right to defend itself, but must take a stand for the sake of our country's sovereignty and future. I am proud to stand with Texas, because this is not just a Texas problem. This is a national crisis. Every single community has turned into a border community because of the open border policies of Joe Biden. Overwhelming our communities, bringing illicit fentanyl, increasing crime, and displacing American taxpayers, including students in a high school at New York who were forced to study at home, and now illegals are at a public high school to house them, and students are forced to do online learning. On Friday, I led New York Republicans calling on my home governor, Kathy Hochul, to join the 25 governors in support of Texas Governor Abbott as he tirelessly works and stands with Border Patrol officers to not only secure Texas's border, but secure our country from this invasion that Joe Biden's policies have created. We are proud to stand with our colleagues from Texas today. You will hear from many of them, and I'm honored to turn it over to my colleague, the Majority Whip, Tom Emmer. Good morning. I want to begin by taking a moment of silence to honor the 3 U.S. service members that bore the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our country. Thank you. We know that American troops are at risk around the world because of Joe Biden's weak global leadership, that foreign adversaries like Iran fear no reprisal for taking American lives. Also at home, border security is the most fundamental responsibility of a nation, and House Republicans are serving as the last line of defense to secure our border. As we speak, House Republicans on the Homeland Security Committee are marking up the long overdue articles of impeachment against Alejandro Mayorkas, holding him accountable for his breach of the public trust and willful refusal to enforce our laws. Mayorkas and Joe Biden have failed the American people, and Secretary Mayorkas is responsible for the devastation and destruction and the implementation of the failed Biden border policies that have led to a crisis in states and communities nationwide. Our country is experiencing a full-fledged invasion with illegal immigrants pouring across our borders in record numbers, encouraged by Joe Biden's open border policies. Since stepping foot in the Oval Office, there have been over 8.3 million illegal crossings nationwide. Over 360 of those individuals are on the terrorist watch list, and this crisis is not going away. December marked the highest single month of illegal immigrant encounters at our southern border in history. From the northern to the southern border, every single community has been turned into a border community and destroyed countless American families in the process, whether that's through fentanyl poisoning, rising crime, or displacing American students and taxpayers, like a school in New York. The Biden border crisis has created the most pressing humanitarian, national security, and homeland crisis in our nation's history. In the last 3 months, just in the northern border, which I represent in my district, the northern border has seen more illegal crossings than the total of both 2021 and 2022 combined. Yet you have far-left leaders like New York Governor Kathy Hochul trying to force New York taxpayers to shovel out $2.4 billion to subsidize Joe Biden's border crisis. Joe Biden, Mayorkas, and far-left Democrats have failed the American people, making their priorities crystal clear. Illegal immigrants come first, American families come last in Joe Biden's America. House Republicans will not sit idly by while Joe Biden and extreme Democrats refuse to do their job. In addition to pursuing the impeachment of Mayorkas, we are bringing 4 important bills to the floor this week committed to addressing Biden's border crisis. With that, I'm honored to pass it over to the Majority Whip, Tom Emmer.
For the American people who are watching today, there is a reason that the border crisis is the #1 issue, and it is because it has been a catastrophe of Joe Biden's making. You heard from members all across this country who talked about how every state is a border state, whether it's New York, Colorado, Indiana, Pennsylvania. We heard from Texas, West Virginia, Illinois, Louisiana, Minnesota. Every state is facing this border crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis, a national security crisis with hundreds on the terrorist watch list. It is an economic crisis, a sovereignty crisis, and a constitutional crisis. House Republicans will continue to lead on securing the border and returning to the most secure border policies that we've ever seen under President Trump. We passed the Secure the Border Act. We know we need to return to the Remain in Mexico policy. We must end catch and release. We have to support our Border Patrol officers and our local law enforcement across this country, and we have to continue building the wall. We passed our Secure the Border bill. We will continue to stand to make sure that we're protecting this great nation, and we will hold Secretary Mayorkas and, most importantly, President Joe Biden accountable, and the American people are going to hold them accountable as well. Thank you very much to our guests who are here today. Thank you, Anne, on behalf of so many victims of human trafficking that are facing this humanitarian scourge. Thank you, Brandon Judd, for your advocacy on behalf of your colleagues in the Border Patrol. I represent Border Patrol agents in my district who we work with every day. So as you talked about the challenges they're facing because of the surge on both the southern and northern border, we hear that every single day from my constituents. And thank you, Sheriff, on behalf of all the incredible law enforcement officers, including the 15 county sheriffs in my district who work so hard every day. We're so grateful for your leadership. Thank you very much.
Good morning. This week, House Republicans continue to lead on key issues facing Americans at home and threats facing our troops and allies abroad. Unlike Joe Biden, House Republicans stand with Israel, and we will vote on the Israel Security Supplemental Appropriations Act, a standalone $17.6 billion package which will provide life-saving funding and resources to stand with Israel and protect American soldiers who have been under attack from Iranian-backed proxies. Under Joe Biden, over 150 attacks have been carried out against American soldiers by Iranian terrorists and their supporters. Joe Biden's weakness has emboldened our adversaries abroad and put American lives at risk. Providing funding for our troops and ensuring Israel has the resources to defend itself from the onslaught of unprovoked terrorist-backed attacks is not political or partisan. It is a moral imperative. Here at home, Joe Biden's weakness and open border policies have left our borders wide open. Millions of illegal immigrants have invaded our country due to Joe Biden's open border executive actions. And while Joe Biden and extreme Democrats push non-starter legislation that will only worsen the crisis at our border, House Republicans have already passed H.R. 2, the strongest border package ever, and this week we will vote to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas for his willful and systemic refusal to enforce our immigration laws and breach of public trust. With that, I'm honored to hand it over to our colleague, Congressman Ken Calvert, who serves as the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee Chair to discuss the Israel supplemental bill. Ken.
Thank you so much, Matt Gaetz.
The American people are smart. They know that the weaponized attacks of radical far-left prosecutors and Joe Biden's Department of Justice against President Donald Trump are nothing more than a targeted political witch hunt used to further their own extreme far-left political agenda and hijack the will of the American people come Election Day. As President Donald Trump continues to dominate in the polls, extreme Democrats will stop at nothing in attempt to prevent President Donald Trump from returning to the White House, and the Democrats are shredding the Constitution in the process. Joe Biden claims that democracy is on the ballot. Yet the American people know that it is Joe Biden and Democrats who are openly attacking democracy. I am honored to stand as an original co-sponsor on Congressman Gates' resolution that President Donald Trump did not engage in insurrectional rebellion against the United States. That is a fact. Rogue far-left Democrat operatives are attempting to use this lie to illegally take President Trump off the ballot. This week, the Supreme Court will begin arguments in Trump v. Anderson to determine if liberal activist judges have the right to erase Donald Trump from the ballot, steal the election, and the American people's right to elect our leaders. For the sake of American democracy, I am proud to fight for President Trump and the tens of millions of American patriots who face political persecution. With that, I'm honored to turn it over to Bill Posey, our colleague who is also a co-sponsor of this bill. Bill.
I'm so excited to be here in Nassau County in support of Mazi Phillip. You can see under Chairman Caro's tremendous local leadership, you see members of the New York delegation who are proudly here. It's all hands on deck, and I will tell you, where I represent in upstate New York, a couple inches of snow aren't going to keep us from the polls. So the people who are watching, it is so important that you turn out. Do not let snow keep you home. I know you're going to turn out to save this country and elect Mazi Phillip tomorrow to Congress. So with that, I'll take questions.
Why isn't Phillip doing this with the press right now? Where are you?
She's on Fox News.
She's on multiple media outlets doing her rally. She's doing multiple media availabilities. And you know what the reality is? Why isn't Tom Suozzi answering the question why he voted 100% of the time with Biden? Why isn't Tom Suozzi answering the question why he supported Kathy Hochul and the defund the police New Yorkers? Why isn't Tom Suozzi standing up strongly in support of Israel, condemning anti-Semitism? He is not. He owns Biden's failed policies, lock, stock, and barrel. And no matter what the biased media attempts to do, the voters know better, which is why Mazi Phillip is going to win tomorrow.
What are some of the issues
The number one issue is the border crisis, and voters know that that is a direct result of Democrats' failed policies, whether it's their sanctuary state, sanctuary city policies that Tom Suozzi has supported here, or whether it's Joe Biden's executive actions that have opened the border wide open. And we're experiencing it as New Yorkers. We see it when it's illegal migrants committing crimes against everyday New Yorkers. We're targeting our brave law enforcement officers. That is the number one issue, and for voters, they're going to vote for Mazi Phillip. Put a stop to Joe Biden's border crisis.
Are you taking her under your wing? If she wins, will you take her under your wing?
I get the opportunity to work with all the House Republicans. Mazi Phillip is a rock star. She is a superstar. She is going to bring the concerns of New York Sub-District to the highest level, and she is going to hit the ground running. I am so excited when we swear her into office.
One of the states of this election for Washington and for this fall is this the bellwether for the battle of the House?
Every election, the stakes are very high. When it's special elections with such a slim majority, the stakes are very, very high. This is the smallest majority in the history of modern Congress, so every vote matters. So when we talk about being the last line of defense against single-party Democrat rule as House Republicans, we mean it. We need a Republican presidency to stand strong against Joe Biden's failed policies that cause crises across this country, whether it's the Biden border crisis, whether it's the Biden inflation crisis, or whether it's the Democrats' crime crisis that we've experienced right here in New York. So vote Mazi to bring our values from New York State, specifically from Nassau County. She will represent and be their voice in Washington.
And Mayor, I guess tomorrow you have the votes?
Yes, we will pass the impeachment. Yes.
Congressman, what can House Republicans do right now to stop the migrant crisis, especially as it's coming into New York?
Well, we already passed the Secure the Border Act, which Tom Suozzi opposed, so did every other Democrat in Congress. That would return to the effective Secure the Border policies under President Trump. What the American people do not want to see is Joe Biden trying to pass the buck, when the American people know that the border crisis we're experiencing today is a direct result of the executive actions of Joe Biden, who left our border wide open. He made our border wide open. And we're not just seeing it on the southern border. Look at the national news story just in the past 24 hours about the illegals crossing in the northern border as well, right? Coming in my district, I've stood strong for border security. Mozzie supports Secure the Border Act. It's Tom Suozzi and Democrats who oppose the Secure the Border Act.
Did you pass the new 408 bill?
Listen, every Democrat opposed the Secure the Border Act. Every single Democrat voted no. Joe Biden threatened to veto it, and Chuck Schumer refused to bring it up. We've done our job as House Republicans to pass the Secure Border Act. The American people see through this nonsense that's perpetuated by the media, serving as stenographers for Joe Biden. 80% of the American people understand that the border crisis is the result of Joe Biden, and Tom Suozzi's desperate attempt to pass the buck. People know that it's because of Democrats' failed policies. Why do they know it? Because we had the most secure border in modern history under President Trump, and House Republicans passed the Secure the Border Act.
To get on board with the Republican bill.
Yeah, vote in support of our Secure Our Border Act, which passed out of the House. And it is the strong policies that we know that work to secure the border.
What about the soldier
Watching Nassau County from afar, what strikes you about their operation in other counties and the rest of the country? I mean, they've, 2018 did a huge comeback.
Chairman Cairo has done a tremendous job, and most importantly, he empowers the people of Nassau County. Look at how many volunteers are out here. They have been contacting voters, they have been putting up signs, and look at the local elections. When people said we couldn't get it done, Nassau County is ruby red. Suffolk County went red this last election cycle. It's moving in the Republican direction because people understand the impact of failed Democrat policies, and they understand it more than anywhere in New York State, because we've seen it at the federal and state level.
And moderate voters, independents, it seems like
independents are moving in our direction. In a district like mine, I win independent voters, I win unaffiliated voters, and we're seeing Republicans win those independent voters here because they want strong voices that will stand up and support our law enforcement, that will oppose Joe Biden's failed policies, that will put a stop to defund the police Democrats like we've seen in New York State. So I'm sure you're going to be covering the election tomorrow night. Thank you, and Mozzie's going to win.
President Trump to weigh in, do you think that he will, or would you like him to?
I know that Mozzie Phillip is going to be a proud Republican vote, and we know that it's so important to have all those voters turn out. And she said she supports President Trump. So we're going to thank you. We have votes in session, so I will. Oh, absolutely. It's moving in our direction. Big time.
Oh, come on!
Thank you, Chairman Cairo. Are we ready to win this tomorrow, Nassau County? Are we going to vote to send Mozzie to Congress? Yes, we are. You know, every election we say this is the most important election in our lifetime, but let me tell you, the nation is watching what happens here tomorrow in New York's 3rd District. The world is watching what here's tomorrow, and I know the people of Nassau County and parts of Queens are going to come out to vote for Mozzie to put a stop to Joe Biden and all of Joe Biden's puppets, to put a stop to Democrats in Congress. Because look at the failed policies under Joe Biden when Democrats had single-party rule. We have a border crisis right here in New York State. Raise your hand if this is a border crisis in this state. It is, and it is a direct result of Joe Biden. Mozzie stands proudly for securing our border. House Republicans will continue to stand up to secure our border. We have a weak, unfit president who is trying to pass the buck when the American people and New Yorkers are smart. We know that the border crisis is because of Joe Biden's failed policies. On top of that, we have an inflation crisis caused by the trillions and trillions of reckless spending from single-party Democrat rule, led by Joe Biden and also from the Democrats in Albany and New York City. Mozzie will stand up for hardworking families in this district. She will stand up for small businesses, for manufacturers right here in Nassau County in New York's 3rd District. And on top of that, what have we seen from New York Democrats like Tom Suozzi? They are the party of defunding the police. We back the blue. New Yorkers back the blue. Nassau County backs the blue. Mozzie Phillip backs the blue. She has done that as a Nassau County legislator, and she will do that in Congress. And the media won't tell you this because they only want to promote
far-left radical women. They do not want to promote our amazing conservative women leaders. But Mazi will make history when she is the 38th, the highest number ever, of Republican women sworn into office in this Congress. We are going to get that done in Nassau County and make history. Let's not forget, as New Yorkers, we are so proud to be New Yorkers every single day. We are so proud that New York delivered the House Republican majority, thanks to you right here on Long Island and these great members. And we are going to add to that with supporting Mazi Pilip. I am so excited to be here today. We are all in to support Mazi. Thank you so much to Chairman Cairo. Thank you to my colleagues in the delegation. Most importantly, thank you to all of you, the volunteers, our friends and neighbors who are going to turn out this vote to save America. Let's get this done. God bless Nassau County. God bless the United States of America. And God bless Mazi Pilip. Thank you, Chairman. One more.
Good morning. First, House Republicans are so excited to welcome back our Majority Leader, the legend from Louisiana, Steve Scalise. Welcome back, Steve. We're so excited to have you back. Before we talk about the week ahead, I want to touch on the bombshell report last week from the special counsel confirming that President Biden retained and mishandled classified documents for years in unsecure location. Special counsel Hur's decision to not prosecute Biden because of his deteriorating mental state further demonstrates the un-American two-tier justice system that exists in Joe Biden's America. There cannot be one set of rules if your last name is Biden and another set of rules for the rest of America. And the American people know that if someone is mentally unfit to stand trial, they are unfit to serve as commander-in-chief. Turning to our agenda of this week, House Republicans will continue to deliver on our promises. Yesterday, after a year-long investigation led by the House Homeland Security Committee under the leadership of Chairman Mark Green, we executed our constitutional duty impeaching Secretary Mayorkas for violating his oath to support and defend the Constitution, subvert the rule of law, and breach the American public's trust. Impeachment is just one step. The Senate must pass House Republicans Secure the Border Act, the strongest border security bill in history, to stop the invasion at our borders, which we are seeing under Joe Biden's policies. This week, House Republicans will also bring the Unlocking Our Domestic LNG Potential Act to the House floor, stopping Joe Biden's war on American energy and unleashing domestic energy production. With that, I'm proud to hand it over to Congressman Ronnie Jackson from the great state of Texas.
I have two very important questions for you. Are we ready to fire Joe Biden this November? And are we ready to elect President Donald J. Trump to save America? Yes, we are. It's time to make history. We always say that every election is the most important election in our lifetime, but this election truly is. Because in just 3 short years, Joe Biden and the far-left Democrats have laid waste to our great nation. For the first time ever, the majority of Americans believe the next generation will be worse off than their parents. This is fundamentally not who we are. The American dream is being destroyed by the radical left, and we are in a country that's in crisis. From Joe Biden's catastrophic border crisis, to Bidenflation crushing hardworking families, to evil terrorists attacking our most precious ally, Israel, to the shredding of our Constitution, and to the unprecedented, illegal, and corrupt weaponization of the federal government. We, the people, must vote to save our hallowed republic. The mainstream media, the loyal stenographers of the left, they fundamentally underestimate we, the people, every day. They underestimate President Donald J. Trump every single day. And I'm proud to say they have underestimated me at every turn.
But I will never underestimate the power of you, the power of we the people, because we know, like President Donald J. Trump knows, that we work for you, not the arrogant editorial boards, not the cocktail party chattering class, not the entitled swamp, you, the people. Ten years ago, I was proud to make history as the youngest woman ever elected to the United States Congress. And it is my... Thank you. And it is my highest professional honor to represent New York's 21st Congressional District, the cradle of the American Revolution. I started my campaign at 28 years old. No one thought I could win a primary, let alone a general election, and flip a district from Democrat to Republican. They said, she can't win. Sound familiar? You see, I don't come from a political family. I was raised in a hardworking small business family who loves our country. I saw the extraordinary work ethic that my parents put into building their small business and providing a better opportunity for their children than they had themselves. I was the first member of my immediate family to have the opportunity to graduate from college, and I graduated from Harvard, but that's not the achievement. The achievement is graduating from Harvard and staying a conservative. And don't worry, I'll get back to Harvard in a minute. But in this first underdog campaign, we out-hustled, outworked, and we flipped a district from Democrat to Republican. We were underestimated, and we won by a historic margin thanks to we, the people. You see, this was a district that Barack Obama won twice. Now, it's Trump and Elise country. After that first election in 2016, Democrats came after me with millions of dollars in attack ads because I was the only elected Republican woman in the Northeast who stood by President Trump. The Democrats spent every penny they could muster, but I doubled down, fought back, and proudly voted for President Donald J. Trump. And we all know how this ends. Trump defied odds, made history, and made America great again. But the vicious left is relentless, and I was underestimated yet again when during the first sham impeachment in 2019, infamous Russia hoaxer Adam Schiff was so bothered by my crystal clear defense of the Constitution, the rule of law, and President Trump that he broke congressional rules to try and shut me down. But he failed. And like all of you, on January 6th, I stood up for the Constitution and election integrity. I then went on to defeat and replace Pelosi puppet Liz Cheney. And now I'm proud to serve in top leadership as House Republican Conference Chair, and I'm proud to be the first member of Congress to endorse President Trump for re-election. Time and time again, I have stood in the breach for President Trump, for the Constitution, and most importantly for you, we the people, in some of the toughest fights of our republic. The American people know that I always have a backbone of steel. Just ask the presidents of Harvard and Penn. Sorry, I should say the former presidents of Harvard and Penn. Did you all see that congressional hearing on anti-Semitism? I've been in a lot of high-profile hearings over my years in Congress, but this was truly the most morally bankrupt testimony that I have ever witnessed. And I asked each of the university presidents a simple question, and it was not a political question, it was a moral one. And that question was this: does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct on bullying and harassment? And shockingly, one after another shocked the world and answered, quote, "It depends on the context." And the world heard. Let me be clear, it does not depend on the context. You ask that same question to 3 hardworking constituents from my district, a farmer, a manufacturer, and a suburban mom, and they know how to answer that question. It is now the most viewed testimony in the history of the United States Congress with billions of views. And let me say it again for all to hear: 2 down, so many to go. They're fired. And this hearing showed the world what we already know, that there is a radical leftist rot in our higher education system that is destroying the minds of our next generation. These are the same so-called elite schools that rank last when it comes to defending freedom of speech. They gleefully cancel conservatives simply for being pro-life or standing up for election integrity, and yet they fail to condemn the genocide of Jews. We must stop the flow of taxpayer dollars to these dens of anti-Semitism. We must account for every dollar of foreign funding flowing into these schools, and we will end the tax breaks that have incentivized this moral rot on campus. And we all know it's not just these 3 schools, it's sadly schools across the country. That's why subpoenas are already out the door. It's why we launched an investigation, and we will not rest until we hold them accountable. That historic hearing showed that one voice supported by the American people can set off an earthquake and a reckoning and help save our country. We cannot give up. The life of our country is at stake, and as we all know, the closer President Trump gets to victory, the dirtier the Democrats, their stenographers in the media, and the corrupt prosecutors will get. They will stop at nothing, and I mean nothing, in their attempt to steal this next election. We saw Democrats baselessly impeach President Trump twice. They indicted him 4 times for non-crimes and are trying to bankrupt him and destroy his successful business. In my home state of New York, far-left Democrat New York Attorney General Tish James, who campaigned on going after President Trump, she teamed up with an unethical Democrat Manhattan judge to unconstitutionally impose a nearly $500 million penalty on Trump for the victimless non-crime of paying back banks in full, on time, as agreed, with interest. It's corrupt. And the left has gone so far as to desperately try to remove President Trump from the ballot. Why? Because Joe Biden's approval is in free fall, and they want to take away the vote from you. Meanwhile, you have the corrupt Joe Biden crime family lining their pockets from illegal influence peddling schemes, the Biden crime family. Yet Democrats in the media like to pretend they are saving democracy. But it's the radical left and the Democrats that are destroying democracy. But we cannot let them, and we won't let them. Ladies and gentlemen, as we enter this election season, we cannot lose sight of what's at stake. America itself is on the line. We had the most secure border in our nation's history when President Trump left office. Joe Biden took executive actions leading to the most wide-open border in our nation's history, with over 8 million illegals invading our country, an amount greater than the population of 36 states. Biden halted border wall construction. He ended Trump's Remain in Mexico policy and implemented catch and release. In Joe Biden's America, Every district is a border district. Every state is a border state. The southern border is being invaded, and even on the northern border in my district, illegal crossings are up over 1,400%, including individuals on the terrorist watch list. Crime is spreading from cities to small towns. Cartels cross the southern border with zero consequences. Illegal immigrants come to our cities, assault our brave law enforcement officers, rob our neighbors, and if they are in New York City, Democrats give them a taxpayer-funded debit card. Fentanyl is pouring into every crevice of the country and poisoning a generation of Americans. This is Joe Biden's border crisis. The media won't hold him accountable. The left won't hold him accountable. So you and I must, and we will hold him accountable at the ballot box. And the border crisis is not the only Biden crisis. We are in an economic crisis for hardworking Americans. President Trump left Joe Biden the strongest economy in my lifetime. Millions of new jobs, historic wage growth for blue-collar workers, the lowest unemployment in 50 years, booming U.S. manufacturing, and 15 million Americans lifted out of poverty. Yet Joe Biden and the Democrats quickly destroyed this booming economy by passing trillions of dollars of reckless spending, leading to painful Bidenflation, the worst inflation in my lifetime. Now, hardworking young families can't afford homes. Middle-class workers can't afford groceries. The cost for nearly everything has skyrocketed, from car insurance to family pizza night. And President Biden has the audacity to point to Wall Street and claim that the economy is booming and Bidenomics is working. It's offensive to the American people. And there's one more Biden crisis that I want to point out, and it's the most insidious of them all. It's one I witness every single day when I defend President Trump from the deep state. And that is the way Democrats attack our democracy. We saw it with the Russia collusion hoax. Obama spied and then lied. We saw it with how they unconstitutionally rigged the 2020 election. We saw it when the deep state colluded with big tech and used taxpayer dollars to censor the accurate Hunter Biden laptop story. And we see it today as unelected liberals try to unconstitutionally remove Trump from the ballot. And let's remember, Democrats objected to every Republican president in the 21st century. This is the same justice system that shrugs off the worst corruption we've ever seen in the White House from the Biden crime family. Here is a rule of thumb that I know you will agree with. What the Democrats accuse us of, they are guilty of 10 times over. And here's why this really matters. If they weaponize the government against President Trump, they can weaponize it against you. And they have. Joe Biden's weaponized DOJ has targeted Catholics, gun owners, conservatives, and even parents at school board meetings. It's up to you, my fellow American patriots, to save our republic. President Trump truly has the most powerful force behind him. You, we the people. Ladies and gentlemen, here's what I want you to know. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, whatever your age, if ever there was a time for patriots to step up and fight, this is it. And it will not be easy. When the media and the elites attack us for supporting President Trump, it's because they are scared. They're scared of what he will accomplish when he drains the swamp. And they're scared of what you will accomplish. So remember what President Trump taught us. When they attack you, we double down and fight back. We are counting on the people to save this great country, to save America, and save America we will. And I want to end with this. As we embark on the difficult path ahead, I again turn to Galatians 6:9.
And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. We, the people, will never give up on America. I will never give up on you. President Trump will never give up on you. Thank you. God bless you. God bless President Trump. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much, CPAC. Thank you.
Chair, and I recognize the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the morning of January 4th, Mr. Secretary, you were in the critical care unit. The acting Secretary of Defense was vacationing in Puerto Rico, and President Biden was unaware that you were not in the chain of command. Now, as you know, I represent Fort Drum in the 10th Mountain Division, which you know well. Thank you for your service there in the North Country. But on this same date of January 4th, do you know how many 10th Mountain Division soldiers were deployed and are still deployed today in Iraq and Syria in support of Operation Inherent Resolve?
You know, I know that they are deployed. I don't know what the number is.
It's just over 2,500. And on January 4th, at approximately 4 a.m. our time, the U.S. carried out a significant strike against a senior Iranian-backed leader in Iraq, correct?
That's correct.
And because President Biden did not know you were outside of the chain of command during this U.S. strike, if Iran or its proxies in Iraq or Syria had carried out a retaliatory strike against 10th Mountain Division soldiers, the president's chain of command would have and could have broken down, potentially delaying presidential orders to protect lives of American forces, constituents that I represent. Do you understand why this is unacceptable to the American people and to those military families?
Well, thanks. First of all, I would say that when we're attacked, we have the right to defend ourselves and respond immediately if it's a local attack. If a strike is warranted, then recommendations need to be provided to the president. Those recommendations come through from me, and after I've consulted with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and also the combatant commander. The deputy secretary would have done the same thing. And she has all of the capabilities and situational awareness to do that.
Except the president wasn't aware. The president of the United States was not aware that you were not in the chain of command. So God forbid there was a retaliatory strike.
Yeah,
that would have caused potential delays, and it is unacceptable. Let me ask you this. What disciplinary action would a junior service member face if he or she failed to properly notify their chain of command and failed to report for duty?
If a service member was in a hospital, I think the chain of command would be concerned about why they were in a hospital and make sure that they're doing the right things to take care of them and their families.
But don't you think it's their responsibility to notify their commanding officer?
I think
the answer is yes.
Possible, yes. In my case, you know, I would expect that my organization would do the right things to notify senior leaders if I am the patient in the hospital. Yeah.
It is unacceptable, and you have admitted as such that there was a breakdown in communication with the President of the United States, and I highlight the exact time, 4 a.m. January 4th, when you consider 10th Mountain Division soldiers and the potential for a retaliatory attack. That breakdown is unacceptable, and you said something very important. You said there was never a break in command and control. But yet the President of the United States was not aware that you were outside of the chain of the command. So is the President not a part of this command and control? Don't you believe that the Commander-in-Chief and the SecDef, that is critical for command and control?
He is clearly at the top of the chain in terms of command and control. But what's important is that you know, we provide him with credible options and that he can pursue to address any situation. And it would have happened in this case because—
Except he was unaware. So what's important is the President was unaware of this breakdown in command and control, and you were not there in terms of who he would hear from.
Time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from
Thank you for coming this morning. The American people have spoken. They made clear what we have known for months. President Donald J. Trump is our Republican nominee and will be the 47th President of the United States. His America First agenda secured our borders, made America energy independent, and always puts the needs of the American people first. That is not the State of the Union we will hear from Joe Biden this week, because the American people deeply understand that under Joe Biden's failed presidency, the State of the Union is in crisis. And this is a crisis of Joe Biden's making. As Ronald Reagan famously asked us, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" The answer for hardworking Americans across the country is a resounding no. Whether it's the catastrophic border crisis ravaging our nation and leading to tragic loss of life of American citizens, the painful Bidenflation causing middle-class families to struggle to make ends meet, or our most precious ally Israel facing the bloodiest day since the Holocaust, as Joe Biden projects weakness around the globe. Joe Biden has failed America and the American people. And at what will be his final State of the Union, Joe Biden and the White House will desperately try to pass the buck, blame Congress, and shirk responsibility in a desperate attempt to reset his abysmal presidency. But it won't work because the American people are smart. There is no reset button for Joe Biden. Even the Democrats' loyal stenographers in the mainstream media have been forced to acknowledge that Joe Biden is a deteriorating president with a failed record and polling in free fall. Each of our House Republican members will host a guest that highlights the Joe Biden State of the Union in crisis, whether it's Border Patrol officers like my guest from the North Country, Brandon Budlong, or families who have lost loved ones due to Joe Biden's dangerous open border policies. Each of our members who will speak today will talk about these issues as we prepare to hear from Joe Biden this week. And one of the members who understands the impact of Joe Biden's crises firsthand is Congresswoman Jen Kakins from Virginia's 2nd Congressional District. Jen.
From New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Knight, thank you for your testimony today. In 2022, gun ban activists, amalgamated bank, and far-left politicians pushed for the creation of an unconstitutional merchant category code to be assigned to firearms retailers to identify, quote, suspect purchases and report purchasing patterns to law enforcement, a clear unconstitutional infringement on Second Amendment rights, and a clear backdoor to a gun registry. In fact, failed New York Attorney General Tish James specifically mentioned the importance of labeling gun and ammunition sales as a way to indicate an imminent crime. Since then, some states have banned the code, while states like California have mandated it to surveil Americans' purchases. This is why I introduced the Protecting Privacy in Purchases Act with Congressman Barr and Hudson to put a stop to this code and protect law-abiding Americans from this infringing unconstitutional overreach. Can you explain how does this code threaten Americans' privacy and constitutional rights?
Thank you very much. This code, and if we were to do similar codes for other sensitive issues, risks creating a raft of false positives where individuals who are potentially engaging in Second Amendment activity, because it's important to know that the MCC doesn't tell you what people buy, it just tells you where they buy it, right? Will be reported to the government as potentially suspicious for no real basis, or at least not a basis that is likely to be reasonable. And that's going to create a database that is available that could be searched later. One of the dangerous things about this financial database is that, or these financial records, is that they're retrospective. And even perhaps just as bad is that there's precious little reason to believe it would be effective at its stated goal for a host of reasons I can get into if you want.
Yes, please expand.
Okay, so the problem here is that you won't know what someone buys. You're expecting banks to correctly identify what is really a hallmark of violence. You're expecting them to report it promptly. You're expecting law enforcement to then act on it promptly and effectively. And so I'd like to point to, I don't know if they'd like me pointing to it, but Guns Down America has a report that advocates the MCC, but if you look at the examples they point to as possible examples where this could have helped, it's hard to believe they would, either because there's such a short time frame, 12 days. There's a reason to believe, I don't see why we believe that 12 days would be enough time for law enforcement to act on it, because we don't know how fast it takes the government to use any SARs. Or it's hard to actually differentiate suspicious activity from legitimate activity. Rather, they look at cases and then work backwards. So we don't know what the denominator is. We don't know how many false positives there will be. Also, in the recent report, when we look at the key bank methodology, it's very, very broad. It's very over-inclusive. And its thresholds are such that it's far more than you need to spend to commit a horrible act of violence, but less than you'd spend to get a good hunting rifle and scope. And so how confident should we be that we're going to actually get more noise or signal than noise? I don't believe we should be. Given how little we know about how SARS are treated as is, I think we should be deeply skeptical.
And do you believe this is a backdoor to a gun registry?
I believe some of its supporters view it as a backdoor to discourage firearms purchases.
Well, in my district in upstate New York, and Americans across this country are proud to stand up for our constitutional rights and understand this is an infringement on our constitutional rights. Why is my bill so important?
What's his point?
Well, ma'am, I think that efforts to restrict the collection of data at the bank level are the best option we have currently, because under current law, unless we can reform the BSA, once the bank has that data, government has that data. So preventing the collection at the bank level is your first best option.
Thank you very much. I yield back. Thank you very much, Congressman Owens. Dr. Goldfarb, in our ongoing investigation of higher ed institutions and the increase of anti-Semitism that is on display at Harvard, Penn, MIT, the three schools we had here, but beyond that, throughout colleges and universities, one theme that is very concerning to me is the offices of DEI on these college campuses are inherently anti-Semitic. And I'll give you an example from my alma mater, Harvard. Even prior to the October 7th Hamas attacks against Israel and the failure of Harvard's leadership to protect Jewish students on campus, hundreds of Jewish students reached out to Harvard's Office of DEI, raising concerns about the rise of anti-Semitism, and they did not even receive a single response from the Office of DEI. So can you comment? I know that you've watched, as a former dean of Penn's med school, you watch what's happening on that campus, but can you talk to me about how these offices of DEI fuel this increase in anti-Semitism?
Yeah, we've written about it, and Dr. Green here has written about this quite extensively as well. I think the point is that once you start dealing with this identity politics, once you start thinking about people as members of groups, he's pointed out how Jews suddenly become the oppressor simply because of their prominence in these academic institutions. Once identity politics takes over, then one of the natural consequences of it is divisiveness and antagonism between groups, because now we're putting people into these groups. Yascha Mounk has recently written about this in his book, The Identity Trap, and points out, as a man of the left, what a great concern this is for American life. And I think what we're seeing in the anti-Semitism that's really sprung up terribly in the last few months has been the natural outcome of thinking about people as members of a group rather than thinking about people as individuals. And I think in medical school, in colleges and undergraduates, that's what we're seeing. I think these students have decided that are parading and demonstrating this anti-Semitic sentiment. They see the Jewish students as members of a group, not as individuals, not as their friends, not as their co-students, but as members of a group. And once you go down that path, this is the consequence of it. This is why it's so divisive in America.
And Dr. Green, would you like to answer the question as well?
Sure. I mean, I agree entirely with Dr. Goldfarb's comments, and just say that we've systematically measured this. I mean, in a study we did of 741 DEI officers, we examined their social media, Twitter feeds, and we observed shocking levels of anti-Semitism coming from people with a professional obligation not to do that. It's as if we studied doctors and found that they were smokers, right? It would be not something you'd expect from people in an occupation. And yet, DEI staff are active promoters of anti-Semitism in their social media feeds, and it's not surprising that they also facilitate it on campus.
Thank you. Yield back.
Can provide.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I yield back.
Ms. Stefanik.
Director Wray, have you read Robert Hur's special counsel report?
I have reviewed it.
Do you believe Joe Biden mishandled classified information?
I'm not going to discuss the report. That's the special counsel's report, and I've referred to
In your opinion as director of the FBI, do you believe he mishandled classified information?
Again, I'm just going to refer to the report, and the special counsel can speak for himself on his report.
Are you aware, and this is breaking news right now, are you aware that there's an audio recording of Joe Biden saying to his ghostwriter in February of 2016, quote, "I just found all the classified stuff downstairs," end quote? Are you aware of that audio recording?
Again, I would just respectfully refer you to the special counsel.
No, I'm asking you,
himself.
are you aware as director of the FBI? You're either aware or you're not.
I'm aware. Am I aware of what now?
Whether the audio exists of Joe Biden saying in February 2017, quote, "I just found all the classified stuff downstairs," end quote, to his ghostwriter.
Again, I'm just going to refer to the special counsel and his testimony and his report.
It sounds like you might be aware of it then. In front of this very committee in an open session, your predecessor, Jim Comey, testified that he did not follow the proper protocol regarding the notification of Congress of the opening of the Crossfire Hurricane, that would be the counterintelligence investigation into President Trump in 2016. To address this illegal abuse of power by the FBI, this committee included direction to the FBI in the IAA requiring notification to congressional leadership of any counter-intel investigation into a federal candidate for office. Is there any counterintelligence investigation into either Joe Biden or Donald Trump?
I would just say I'll refer you to the special counsel has.
That's not a question about the special
investigation.
counsel.
Right.
That's a requirement in the IAA of the FBI. Is there a counterintelligence investigation into either Joe Biden or Donald Trump?
There's no investigation that I could confirm here, no.
Is there a counterintelligence investigation?
Again, I'm not confirming any investigation into either candidate.
Are you aware that you're required by the IAA to notify Congress of any counterintelligence investigation?
And we will comply with the law.
Have you already complied with the law? Has there been a notification?
I believe we have been in compliance with the law.
You believe you have been, or has there been a notification to Congress of any counterintelligence investigation of a federal candidate?
I believe we have complied with the law.
Has there been a counter-intel assessment conducted on either President Biden or President Trump?
Again, there's no assessment that I would confirm here in any way. I believe we have been in compliance with the law.
How about on an immediate family member, and by that I mean spouses or children, of either President Biden or President Trump?
Again, I'm not in the business of confirming, especially not in open hearings, assessments or anything like that when it comes to counterintelligence matters.
So you will confirm in the classified setting when we ask you this question of whether there's a counterintelligence investigation, because you are aware that according to the IAA, you are required by law to notify Congress of any counterintelligence investigation, not just for presidential candidates, but any federal candidate.
We will comply with the law.
So you will answer this in the classified hearing later today?
We will comply with the law.
And what's your understanding of the law?
There's a whole series of oversight requirements that we have related to counterintelligence matters. I'm not going to try to go through all of them.
But specifically the
here.
notification of Congress of a counterintel investigation onto a federal candidate, what is your understanding of the law?
Again, I would want to refer to the lawyers to make sure that I'm appropriately complying with it, but I can tell you we're going to comply with the law, and my understanding is we have been.
Is your assessment that you're required to notify Congress of any counterintel investigation into any federal candidate?
I'm going to defer to the lawyers as to the precision of that.
You're the director of the FBI. They report to you. What is your understanding of the requirement in the IAA?
We're going to comply with the law, including whatever's in the IAA.
I want to turn to the search warrants and the search. In one case of Mar-a-Lago, an unprecedented raid and a search working with Joe Biden's legal team. Were you or your staff, did you have any communication about either the execution of the search warrant on Mar-a-Lago or the search of documents working with Joe Biden's lawyer? Was there any communication with Joe Biden, of you or your team?
Not to my knowledge.
With any White House staff?
By me or my team?
By you or any personnel at the FBI?
Again, I want to make sure I've got your question right. By me or my staff, with who about which?
With the White House staff about the execution of a search warrant on Mar-a-Lago or the search working with Joe Biden's lawyers of classified information?
Not to my knowledge.
What about the Attorney General?
I can't speak for the Attorney General.
No, was there any communication with your staff, with the Attorney General, or you, regarding the execution of the search warrant or the search of Joe Biden's classified documents?
Well, any search would be done in coordination with the Department of Justice. As to who may have communicated with whom,
I'm asking
between
if
the
you,
FBI and the department, I can't.
I'm asking if you communicated.
Whether I communicated?
With the Attorney General, prior or after the execution of the search warrant on Mar-a-Lago?
No.
Do you think it is a national...
Hold on, prior or after?
Prior or after?
Well, I would have had conversations with the Attorney General about the appointment of, at that time, Mr. Lausch.
And what were those conversations?
Just about the fact that he was going to be named. But that's not really about the search itself, I suppose.
And my last question is, do you think it is a national security threat to have a federal campaign account on TikTok?
Well, I've been very clear about my views about TikTok and the national security concerns it presents, and we ban TikTok on all FBI devices. As to what campaigns choose to do with their platforms, I'll leave that to them.
So you don't think it's a national security threat?
I'm not weighing in on that, no.
As the director of the FBI, I agree with you that TikTok is a national security threat. I think it's a national security threat to have campaign accounts on TikTok. You cannot say here today that you think that's a national security threat?
I think TikTok represents all sorts of national security threats. As to whether specific account holders choose to exercise their right to access a TikTok account, I'll leave that to them.
Well, we have a disagreement. I think it's a national security threat to have a presidential campaign on TikTok. Yield back.
Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the House Republican Annual Issues Conference. Yesterday, we discussed the political landscape and growing our House Republican majority. Today, we are focused on covering the key issues facing communities across the country. The American people understand that Joe Biden continues to turn his back on we the people. Joe Biden's failed State of the Union address exposed an unfit leader promoting his failed far-left policies that are leaving Americans behind, creating crisis after crisis. A case in point, Joe Biden apologized for using the term illegal to describe the illegal immigrant who murdered Laken Riley, a young, innocent nursing student. Yet Joe Biden couldn't even pronounce her name correctly. As a mother and as a conservative leader myself, this leaves me speechless. Joe Biden clearly could care less about how his policies are destroying American families and creating a crisis across our country. Under just 3 years of Joe Biden's far-left leadership, our nation has faced crisis after crisis. American families are forced to make hard decisions between putting food on the table or gas in the tank due to the highest inflation in my generation's lifetime. Violent crime is destroying our cities, and open borders is allowing millions of illegal immigrants to invade our country, bringing illicit fentanyl and crime to our streets. Because of the unified and disciplined messaging of this Republican conference with all the members of our conference, we have held Joe Biden's administration accountable for his failed policies. And we have driven Joe Biden's poll numbers on the key issues facing hardworking Americans, whether it's immigration, the economy, crime, and national security. Those poll numbers have plummeted. Unlike Joe Biden, the House Republican Conference is committed to delivering common sense solutions that bring results to the American people. We are the final line of defense to protect American people's freedom, secure our border, and restore the American dream. House Republicans are about to be joined by Israeli Ambassador Herzog to address members for a conversation during today's lunch, because we understand as House Republicans the gravity of what our most precious ally Israel is facing. October 7th was the deadliest day in history for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And Ambassador Herzog will today give an update on the war effort to destroy Hamas, highlight the fact that hostages are still being held by Hamas in Gaza, and making the case for much-needed military aid supported by Republicans that's currently being held up by Chuck Schumer and Democrats in the Senate. Israel is not only fighting for its right to exist, It's fighting for the rights of Jewish people everywhere. And instead of meddling in elections of a sovereign nation, Chuck Schumer should follow House Republicans' lead in supporting our ally in their darkest hour. The obstacle to peace is Democrat leader Chuck Schumer, who has refused to pass the Israeli aid package, which supports our ally Israel as they fight Iranian-backed Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists. This same Israeli aid package that Joe Biden issued an unprecedented veto threat for. House Republicans proudly stand with Israel. We are proud to host Ambassador Herzog here today, and we want to continue to stand up and make sure that we are crystal clear. Chuck Schumer does not stand with Israel. House Republicans do. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Americans have had enough of Joe Biden and far-left Democrats' anti-American energy policies. Since his first day in office, Joe Biden has destroyed American energy independence. He canceled the Keystone Pipeline, killing thousands of jobs, and launched an unprecedented war on American energy. Joe Biden has forced America to rely on foreign adversaries like Russia and Iran, and left American families to foot the bill for skyrocketing energy costs due to this unwanted far-left agenda. From the gas station to the grocery store, American families are hurting. Gas prices are once again on the rise, and in my district in upstate New York, which relies heavily on home heating oil, sky-high utility and heating costs are crushing families, increasing by over 80% in the last 3 years. Joe Biden created this energy crisis, and the American people know it. Republicans know that we need to unleash American energy, not restrict it. It's vital that we ensure America's energy dominance and provide true energy security. That is what we are focused on for Energy Week in the House. We've seen it firsthand. Under the pro-American energy policies of President Donald Trump, we were the world energy leader. Our nation thrived because of the pro-national security, pro-American job energy agenda that lowered cost and prioritized domestic production. Today, we are joined by our colleagues, Congressman Dan Newhouse, who is leading the resolution denouncing all of the anti-American energy policies of Joe Biden. And we also have Congresswoman Diana Harshbarger, whose work on House Energy and Commerce Committee is fighting back against these anti-American energy proposals from Joe Biden. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Diana.
Good morning, everyone.
Chairman, General Guillot, as ballistic missile threats from North Korea and Iran continue to advance, do you believe that it would be strategically worthwhile to construct a third homeland missile defense site at the DoD and Congress's chosen East Coast location at Fort Drum, New York?
Congresswoman, I'm aware that there was a recent assessment that said that such a site was not an operational necessity. However, as an operational commander that watches very closely the advances that our adversaries are making, primarily Iran and even more so North Korea, I think that it's important for me as the commander to have continually assessed the threat and see if there are any changes in the threat environment that would necessitate additional capabilities to affect the homeland. And so I would, sorry.
General, in my office, when you were kind enough to visit, you said it would be strategically worthwhile and you supported the construction. I understand the assessment process, but as you and I spoke in my office, you said this would be strategically worthwhile, particularly as we're considering threats not just of today, but of the future as well.
Yes, Congressman. If the assessment came back that those threats, I thought it would be worthwhile to build that site, a site.
What would an operational requirement for a third homeland missile defense site look like?
Congresswoman, that would depend on the threat, but I think dispersal away from the sites that we have now, so we don't have all of our proverbial eggs in one basket, would be very important. And the other would be to make sure that it is located somewhere in the continental United States where it would have the kinematic responsiveness to intercept threats that are coming from a different avenue.
And Fort Drum meets those requirements.
Well,
That's the DoD's position. That's Congress's position, that Fort Drum is, in fact, the location of a potential East Coast missile defense site. You are aware of that?
I am aware of that, yes, ma'am.
And it meets those requirements?
Well, it does. What I think I'm answering a different question is, with future capabilities that we may have, I think we would have to assess that. But based on the previous, yes, I know that Fort Drum was the primary location.
Great. And you understand if and when Congress establishes a requirement for a third homeland missile defense site on the East Coast, you understand that it's the DoD's responsibility to execute that requirement?
I would be the strongest advocate to execute that requirement if the threat required it. Yes, ma'am.
And then shifting gears here, upstate New York, in addition to being home to Fort Drum in my district, we also are home to another key Arctic unit, the New York Air National Guard 109th Airlift Wing. And the 109th Airlift Wing operates the LC-130Hs, or known as the Ski Birds. These planes, as you know, are the only platform in the world that can provide critical logistical support in and around the Arctic. Yet they are at the very end of their operational capability. Do you believe that the LC-130s have enabled the U.S. to maintain a strategic presence and lead in the Arctic?
Congresswoman, yes, without a doubt. In fact, just this past week, they were in our AOR up at Arctic Edge and Ice Camp operation, performing that unique capability.
We believe, and this is a bipartisan issue for members of the New York delegation, I just authored a letter with my colleague Paul Tonko, so bipartisan support about the urgent need for their recapitalization. So I would refer you to that. We'll make sure your office has a copy of that, but that's very important to maintain our leadership strategically in the Arctic region. Yield back.
Thank you. Representative Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman.
Good morning, everyone. Under Joe Biden, the world is less safe. Since stepping into the Oval Office, Joe Biden's weak foreign policy has been defined by a steady stream of disastrous decisions and a world in chaos as a result. His desperate policy of appeasement has left our nation and our allies vulnerable to attack. Make no mistake, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine because Russia feared no reprisal from Joe Biden. Communist China flew a balloon over the United States, and Joe Biden allowed it. And who can forget Joe Biden's catastrophic and botched Afghanistan withdrawal, abandoning American interests in the Middle East and resulting in 13 American lives lost, all under Joe Biden's watch. And now Israel, our most precious ally, is in the fight for her very survival, facing an onslaught of attacks on its borders from Hamas, and now the unprecedented attack from Iran over the weekend. Russia, Communist China, and Iran have been emboldened by the utter failures of Joe Biden and the Biden administration. Our enemies do not fear recourse from America because of Joe Biden's weakness. For the sake of Israel's survival, our nation, and the world's security, we need to return to President Trump's peace through strength policies, which House Republicans proudly support. With that, we are joined by our Foreign Affairs Chairman, Mike McCall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just say first
Ms. Stefanik, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I want to follow up on my colleague, Rep. Wahlberg's question regarding Professor Joseph Massad. So let me be clear, President, that he was spoken to. Who spoke with him?
He was spoken to by his head of department and his dean.
And what was he told?
I was not in those conversations. I think.
But you're not aware what he was
that
told?
language
What
was
was he told?
unacceptable.
What was he told?
That language was unacceptable.
And were there any other enforcement actions taken? Any other disciplinary actions taken?
In his case, he has not repeated anything like that ever since.
Does he need to repeat stating that the massacre of Israeli civilians was awesome? Does he need to repeat his participation in an unauthorized pro-Hamas demonstration on April 4th? You know, Professor David Schizzer talked about the lack of enforcement. Do you agree that this is an issue with a lack of enforcement? When the policy of Colombia specifically stated on April 5th said, I want to make clear that it is absolutely unacceptable for any member of this community to promote the use of terror or violence, and yet you have no action, no disciplinary action. Do you agree with how the university has handled this?
Yeah, we have 4,700 faculty at Columbia. most of whom spend all of their time dedicated to teaching their students.
But I'm talking about the faculty members who are supporting terror, and it's not just that case. Let me bring your attention to Muhammad Abdu, who was hired after the October 7th terrorist attack against Israel. He, on October 11th, posted, "Yes, I'm with Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad." He also decried false reports accusing Arabs and Muslims of decapitating the heads of children and being rapists. We know that there were decapitations of babies, of innocent Israeli citizens, of seniors, of women. There were rapes, and yet Columbia hired this individual as a professor. How did that hiring process work? Were you aware of those statements before the hiring?
I share with you your repugnance at those remarks. I completely understand that. On my watch, faculty who make remarks that cross the line in terms of anti-Semitism, there will be consequences for them.
What are the consequences
I have
in this
five
case?
cases at the moment who have either been either taken out of the classroom or dismissed.
And is he one of those?
He will never work at Columbia again.
So he has been terminated?
He has been terminated. And not just terminated, but his files will show that he will never work at Columbia again.
So he's currently not employed by Columbia?
He is grading his students' papers and will never teach at Columbia again, and that will be on his permanent
How
record.
are you changing the hiring processes? Because on your watch, he was hired after he made these statements publicly. How are you ensuring this does not happen with your hiring process moving forward?
So when we hire people, obviously they have to meet the academic qualifications, but we do an employment check and a criminal record check. We also ask everyone to do an attestation that they have never been accused of discrimination or part of an investigation around harassment or discrimination. And that attestation has to be signed by all new employees.
And it didn't work in this case?
I think in this case, well, he may not have been subject to an investigation on discrimination or found guilty. It has to be found guilty.
But don't you think it's a problem
qualified.
when the hiring process of Columbia is hiring someone who makes those statements and they
I
hire
agree
him
with you.
after making those statements?
I agree with you that I think we need to look at how to toughen up those requirements. We do have a requirement, but I agree with you. I think we need to look at how we can make them
Let me
more
ask about
effective.
Professor Catherine Frank from the Columbia Law School, who said that all Israeli students who have served in the IDF are dangerous and shouldn't be on campus. What disciplinary action has been taken against that professor?
I agree with you that those comments are completely unacceptable and discriminatory.
But I'm asking you what disciplinary action has been taken.
She has been spoken to by a very senior person in the administration, and she has said that that was not what she intended to say.
And has she publicly apologized?
I have suggested that.
You have suggested that? Has she done that?
I think she will be finding a way to clarify her position.
You see the concern here, though, with the lack of enforcement. You see the concern that speaking to these professors is not enough, and it's sending a message across the university that this is tolerated, these anti-Semitic statements from a position of authority in professors in the classroom is tolerated. My time has expired, but I will have multiple rounds of questions. I yield back. Shafiq, you answered one of the questions of our colleagues across the aisle. You said there has been no anti-Jewish protests. Do the other individuals on the panel agree with that? Start with you, Professor Skizzer.
So I think there have been anti-Semitic protests, so I would say yes.
So you disagree? There have been anti-Jewish protests. Ms. Shipman?
I know there have been a number of incidents, especially one at our law school recently, that the students were trying to call a protest, but it was an event to harass admitted students who were Jewish, and it's outrageous.
So that's anti-Jewish. So the answer would be yes?
Yes.
And Mr. Greenwald?
There have been anti-Semitic events on campus, which I interpret as anti-Jewish.
And Dr. Shafiq, you realize that at some of these events, the slurs and the chants have been F the Jews, death to Jews,
Yep.
F Israel, no safe place, death to the Zionist state, Jews out. You don't think those are anti-Jewish?
Completely anti-Jewish, completely
So you changed your testimony on that
horrible.
issue as well? So there have been anti-Jewish protests.
I didn't get to finish my sentence, so what I was going to say was there were protests that were called that
That's not what you were asked. You were asked, were there any anti-Jewish protests? And you said no.
So the protest was not labeled as an anti-Jewish protest.
I'm not asking what it was labeled.
Anti-Israeli government policy.
The question wasn't what it was labeled.
But anti-Semitic incidents happen, or anti-Semitic things were said. So I just wanted
It is
to
an
finish.
anti-Jewish protest. You agree with that? You change your testimony?
Congresswoman, anti-Jewish things were said at protests, yes.
Thank you for changing your testimony. Another instance when you changed your testimony is you stated that Professor Mossad was no longer chair. Then you stated he's under investigation. He is still chair on the website. So has he been terminated as chair?
Congresswoman, I want to confirm the facts before getting back to you.
I know you confirmed that he was under
that he's-
investigation.
Yes, I can confirm that.
Did
But
you confirm he was still the chair?
I need to confirm that with you.
Well, let me ask you this. Will you make the commitment to remove him as chair?
I think that would be, I would, yes. Let me come back with yes. But I think I just want to confirm his current status before I write.
We'll take
before I
that as a
reply to
yes,
you.
that you will confirm that he will no longer be chair.
Mr. Bean's time has expired.
Was there an effort to get other trustees to sign a letter supporting President Shafiq?
No.
There was not.
No.
Will you comply with all document requests related to email correspondence regarding any potential letter?
We have...
Because board members have come forward anonymously to this committee raising the issue of a letter that was circulated that members of the boards did not sign on in support. Are you testifying today under oath? You have no knowledge of any draft letter in support of Dr. Shafiq?
No knowledge whatsoever, and my understanding is we're fully complying and ready to give you whatever you need.
Mr. Greenwald, are you aware of any letter that was circulated?
No, that's surprising to me.
Professor David, are you aware?
Not at all.
My final question is, there's been a lot of discussion on Colombia's putting out a statement calling for the genocide of Jews. That statement was put out after the catastrophically morally repugnant answers by your colleagues from MIT, Penn, and Harvard, correct? That was when you put out that statement after that hearing?
Congresswoman, you shed a light on an important issue.
I'm just asking when you put it out. It was after that hearing.
It was definitely after it because it,
and
frankly,
you are
it
aware
seemed
that
obvious. And
you are aware that Congress voted 377 to 44 condemning anti-Semitism. That is a strong bipartisan vote. Would you support that vote condemning anti-Semitism?
Yes.
And you are aware that in that bill that got 377 members out of 435 members of Congress condemns From the River to the Sea as anti-Semitic.
Yes, I am aware of that.
But you don't believe From the River to the Sea is anti-Semitic?
We have already issued a statement to our community saying that language is hurtful and we would prefer not to hear it on our campus.
You'd prefer not to hear it, or is there disciplinary action taken against students of those anti-Semitic statements?
Thank you, Ms. Stefanik.
I want an answer to that question.
Sorry. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Has there been disciplinary action taken against students who have chanted From the River to the Sea, which you have testified is anti-Semitic and which Congress has voted that it is anti-Semitic?
So we have some disciplinary cases ongoing around that language. We have specified that those kind of chants should be restricted in terms of where they happen.
We need
and
you
we are
to wrap
looking
it
at
up, Dr. Shafiq.
And we are looking at it. We are looking at it.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Grossman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
I'll yield to Representative Stefanik. Question. I'll yield to Representative Stefanik for a question.
Just to follow up, you should know this, President Shafiq, but Mossad is still in fact listed on the Columbia website as chair of the Academic Review Committee. Are you aware of that?
I would need to check that. I
It's-
don't want to
it's the
misstate.
website's right
I don't want
here.
to misstate because I
So
don't-
he hasn't
I don't
been
know if
removed
it's
as chair.
accurate. I would like to
Do you have
confirm
my
that to
commitment
you.
he'll be removed as chair today?
I have my commitment that I will come back to you and give you the facts.
So he
first.
hasn't been removed. So you said in front of Congress under oath
No,
that
I said I am not sure.
he
I
was
need to check.
removed. Well, I'll tell you what,
need to
he's still listed on chair. Let me ask the Board of Trustees, is that acceptable that he's chair of this committee? Should he be removed today? Ms. Shipman.
Congresswoman, you've put your finger on one of the hardest issues we as board chairs face right now. I think you can see our systems, from the videos you played, everything you're talking about, our systems of rules and enforcement
Are broken. They're broken.
We have worked tirelessly
My
to
question to you, Ms. Shipman, and I'm the one asking the questions here as a United States member of Congress, is do you believe that he should be removed as chair? Because currently he's listed as chair on Columbia University's website.
I don't believe any professor at Columbia should say anything like what our professors have to be held to a higher standard than our students. And I can tell you that
But you can't say at this hearing that he should be removed as chair? Even though he violates university
I
rules?
would not want him as chair, and we are looking at the issue of faculty and what
Mr.
we
Greenwald,
expect
do you
from our
think he should be
faculty
removed as
in
chair?
June.
His comments are abhorrent, and I believe that one of the steps that we could take in terms of discipline is to remove him from that leadership position.
Thank you for that direct answer. And just to let you know, Mr. Abdu is not grading papers right now. He's on campus at the unsanctioned anti-Israel, anti-Semitic event that is being supported by pro-Hamas activists on campus. So that's what Professor Abdu is doing at this very moment. I'll give you back your time.
Okay.
My Investing in America agenda has attracted more than $825 billion. $825 billion in private sector investment, not a penny of which existed before I got elected. It ignited a manufacturing boom, a clean energy boom, a semiconductor boom nationwide. And it's clear we have the strongest economy in the world, and that's a fact. 15 million new jobs created in 3.5 years. Unemployment hasn't been this low for this long for 50 years. Wages are rising. Instead of importing foreign products, we're exporting American jobs. We're exporting American products and creating American jobs. Here in America, where they belong. But folks, my predecessor and his MAGA Republican friends have a very different view. They oppose the CHIPS and Science Act that's powering this growth today. In fact, your Congressman, Brandon Williams, called it corporate welfare. Bless me, Father. And Elise Stefanik, a few counties over, called the CHIPS Act, she said, was Washington at its worst, end of quote. I guess they're not going to be here today to celebrate. But now, conversion is wonderful, isn't it? Now they've seen the massive surge in investment in jobs that we mobilized. And they're singing a different tune now. Now they say this is critical. You got that? Stefanik said this is critical. Now they say what we're doing will, quote, lead to a more prosperous, secure, and innovative America. Well, there's nothing I said like conversion. I agree. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Folks, look, we got to stop this division. I promise to be president for all of America, whether you voted for me or not. Today's investment helps Americans everywhere, in red states and blue states, and proof that we leave no one behind. Of the infrastructure jobs and proposals, we have more of them in red states than in blue states. It's about America.
Good morning. The world is watching as the leadership of our so-called elite colleges and universities continue to fail to condemn anti-Semitism and protect Jewish students on campus. Just look at the abject failure of Columbia's president to enforce their own code of conduct that they gave lip service to during the recent education and workforce hearing. Last night, the pro-Hamas anti-Semitic mob took over an academic building. The university leadership has lost complete control. It is a disgrace, and it is untenable, and we as House Republicans will hold them to account. I will continue to lead on this issue, and House Republicans will expand our efforts on oversight with additional committee chairs with an announcement later today. Also in New York, we are now in week 3 of Alvin Bragg's witch hunt, the first criminal trial of a former president of the United States. It is crystal clear from the opening arguments and evidence that this extraordinarily weak case is blatant lawfare and election interference during the height of the presidential campaign. While the violent crime crisis rages in New York, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg brought bogus felony charges against President Trump for the non-felony of booking a 2017 nuisance claim as a legal expense. Under this bogus legal theory, this somehow impacted the election. This theory is so baseless that it was previously passed over by the prior Manhattan DA, the Manhattan U.S. Attorney, the Federal Election Commission, and Alvin Bragg himself. But a top political appointee in the Biden Justice Department was deployed to Bragg's office to go after Joe Biden's top political opponent and the Republican nominee, Donald J. Trump. And the case is in front of the Democrat judge Juan Merchant, who donated to Biden's campaign and whose daughter is raising tens of millions off this unprecedented case. This is corrupt election interference to its core. Even a former Clinton federal judge said Judge Merchant must recuse. What was Merchant's response? He retaliated against President Trump with an unconstitutional gag order. Last week, the House Judiciary Committee, under the leadership of Chairman Jim Jordan, released a scathing report highlighting Bragg's political investigation and prosecution of President Trump, calling it a direct threat to our republic. Democrats' corrupt and desperate witch hunts against President Trump must come to an end. This is lawfare and blatant election interference, and the American people know it. That is why today I filed an official complaint with the Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility on Joe Biden's special counsel Jack Smith for his clear and illegal efforts of election interference. We will fight the Democrats' unjust lawfare and expose this corruption, whether it is in New York, Atlanta, or here in Washington, D.C. This is an important responsibility of our oversight. In addition to this important oversight work, legislatively, House Republicans are continuing to lead on behalf of the American people. This week on the House floor, we have a series of bills to protect America's public lands while ensuring the safe, reliable development of our natural resources. We are also marking the start of National Small Business Week, the backbone and economic engine of our country. So today we're joined by two chairs, our Chairman of House Natural Resources Committee, Bruce Westerman, and Chairman of Small Business Committee, Roger Williams, to discuss in more detail. I'm proud to turn it over to Chairman Roger Williams from Texas. Thank you so much to our speaker. I want to thank the speaker as well as Chairwoman Fox for visiting Columbia University's campus last week to highlight moral leadership that is sorely needed and lacking when it comes to these university presidents. I also want to thank the speaker for making this a priority for all of House Republicans. It is clear that Jewish families across this country, Americans across this country, are looking for moral clarity, and we are going to deliver where these higher education institutions have failed. As the speaker said last night at Columbia, America watched in disgust as President Shafiq allowed an anti-Semitic pro-terrorist mob to storm and seize an academic building, holding faculty inside, flying pro-Hamas signs, and damaging property. Joe Biden, far-left Democrat governors like my home state in New York, and morally bankrupt university leaders have allowed this moral rot of anti-Semitism to fester, refusing to enforce the laws and refusing to ensure the safety of Jewish students. And it's not just Columbia. This is a moral rot that has taken root across American higher education institutions. At Yale University, a Jewish student was stabbed in the eye with a Palestinian flag. At the University of Southern California, graduation was canceled due to the university being unable to guarantee the safety of students. Jewish students were barricaded at the library at Cooper Union. At my alma mater, Harvard University, a Palestinian flag was hoisted at University Hall where the American flag always flies, in clear violation of university policies. There are dozens of these anti-Semitic encampments across the country. These mobs are breaking university rules, leading to the targeting and harassment of Jewish students and faculty. In December, at a hearing chaired by our Education and Workforce Chairwoman Virginia Fox, we exposed just how ingrained anti-Semitism has become at America's so-called elite institutions in higher education. When I questioned the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct? One after the other said it depends on the context. And the world heard it is now the most viewed congressional testimony in history. 8 days ago, I was the first member of Congress to demand that Columbia President Shafiq resign for her failure to disband the anti-Semitic mob consuming Columbia's campus and her failure to ensure the safety of Columbia's Jewish students. Instead, She negotiated with these self-proclaimed terrorists, allowing their anti-Semitic mob to grow. Enough is enough. It is time to restore law and order, academic integrity, and moral decency to America's higher education institutions. Joe Biden has been deafeningly silent. So I want to thank again the Speaker as well as all of our chairs who will ensure this is a top priority for House Republicans. There can be no moral equivalency. It is time to send a clear message to the world that anti-Semitism has no place in America. The world is indeed watching. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our whip, Tom Emmer.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker Ohana, for your kind introduction and for inviting me here today. Mr. Speaker, MK Moshe Torpaz, MK Danny Luz, distinguished guests, and dear friends, I am profoundly honored to speak in the hallowed halls of your Knesset, in your eternal capital, the holy city of Jerusalem, at this time of historic consequence for Israel and the Jewish people. Today, I stand before you not just as a leader in the United States Congress, but as a lifelong admirer, supporter, and true friend of Israel and the Jewish people. You see, I am lucky to have had the privilege of traveling here many times before, but I must confess that this time feels different. The stakes are higher. Our sense of moral, patriotic duty feels heightened, renewed. 226 days ago, we witnessed the most vicious, brutal attack on Israel and the Jewish people since the Holocaust, a barbaric terrorist attack that claimed more than 1,200 innocent lives. Civilian women, children, and the elderly were ripped from their homes and massacred, raped, beheaded. Jewish families were bound together and burned. Babies burned alive. Atrocities of humanity. We must never forget, and we must never relent. Israelis, Americans, and others were savagely kidnapped from their homes, beaten, tortured, and taken hostage to the terror tunnels beneath Gaza. And we must remind the world every day that there are still over 120 souls held hostage, 226 days of captivity, including Americans, held by Hamas terrorist thugs. Let me be very clear, we will not rest until the hostages are back home. This period calls to mind the many times forces of evil have tried to destroy Israel and the Jewish people. Since Israel's first days of existence, there have been those who have sought out its destruction. You see, we saw the same eliminationist goal in 1948, during the Fedayeen raids of the 1950s and 60s, in the 67 war, the 73 war, the successive wars against Hamas in Gaza, and again on that dark day, October 7th, 2023. What we are witnessing today is a story of the forces of good versus evil, the forces of civilization against the forces of barbarism, of humanity versus depravity. I want to share something that I heard the writer Douglas Murray say a couple weeks ago, which I've witnessed for myself here these past few days. Israel chooses life. Murray is right, but let me go further. In choosing life, Israel fulfills Isaiah's prophecy to be a light unto nations, fighting for its survival and future in one very tough neighborhood. And I get the sense, and I know that the people of Israel know this. In the week after October 7th, 360,000 Israelis reported for military duty, flying home from around the world. That's the equivalent of 20 million Americans, more Americans than served in World War II. Many of these courageous fighters are but of college age in America. What a striking comparison. Young Israelis heeding the call of duty, fighting for their families, their people, and their homeland, while the pro-Hamas apologists on so-called elite campuses across America are in a paroxysm of bloodlust, cosplaying Hamas, calling for intifada and genocide, with signs saying final solution.
chanting death to Israel and chanting death to America. We know what it must look like, but I want you to know something. Those views, though given airtime by some radical Democrat members of Congress, those views do not reflect the views of the American people. The American people stand firmly behind you, and we are already seeing the majority in the body in which I serve, the United States Congress, fight back and turn the tide. Let me repeat, America is firmly behind Israel and the Jewish people. And this goes back to our nation's founding. In 1790, America's founding father, George Washington, wrote a letter to the Jews of Newport, Rhode Island, expressing America's founding impulse, a devotion to religious pluralism. He wrote that the United States would, quote, give to bigotry no sanction and persecution no assistance. He further wrote, quote, may the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while every one shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid. May the Father of all mercies scatter light and not darkness in our paths, and make us all in our several vocations useful here, and his own due time and way everlastingly happy, end quote. As long as I serve the American people, I will defend George Washington's vision of religious pluralism and freedom. Today, this means crushing anti-Semitism at home and supplying the state of Israel with what it needs, when it needs it, without conditions to achieve total victory in the face of evil. For all of you, total victory needs no explanation, but total victory is something too many others throughout the free world fail to understand. Total victory starts, but only starts, with wiping those responsible for October 7th off the face of the earth. There can be no retrievable dignity for Hamas and its backers. When they chose rape, the torture of civilians, and the mutilation of infants as weapons of terrorism, they left no alternative to this just war. When the genocidal zealots running Iran lobbed missiles at this very city, they removed any doubt as to their hideous intentions. Chants of death to America are not hollow slogans. They are a promise that what happened here on October 7th could happen in the United States unless Hamas and its jihadist accomplices are eliminated. My country and all countries must stare truth in the face. This is not Israel's fight alone. It is also our fight, the West's fight. In truth, total victory is about more than responding to one attack. It's about restoring a way of life. It is about securing the Jewish state so that it no longer faces threats of annihilation from any actor, whether from Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, or any other. And it is the United States' high honor and high responsibility to support Israel's effort. I have been clear at home, and I will be clear here. There is no excuse for an American president to block aid to Israel, aid that was duly passed by the Congress. There is no excuse to ease sanctions on Iran, paying a $6 billion ransom to the world's leading state sponsor of terror, or to dither and hide while our friends fight for their lives. No excuse, full stop. That's why I'm proud to have sponsored or backed every measure to aid Israel that has come before the United States Congress. Every single one. It's why I, as a senior member on the House Armed Services Committee and Intelligence Committee, we have helped secure billions of dollars for the Iron Dome, David's Sling, the Iron Beam, anti-tunneling technology, counter-UAS systems, and further development of emerging technologies, most recently in the supplemental aid package passed just last month. It's why I led calls for the White House to speak out against the corrupt ICC. And it's why for years I have been a leading proponent and partner to President Trump in his historic support for Israeli independence and security, including moving the U.S. Embassy to its rightful place in Jerusalem, the negotiation of the historic Abraham Accords, the greatest stride towards peace normalization in more than a quarter century,
adopting the strategy to align U.S. Central Command with Israel, a change that fostered daily communications with the IDF, joint exercises, and crucial coordination with British and Arab partners that helped defend against the Iranian attack. And finally, President Trump's wise decision to call out UNRWA for what it is, a hive of anti-Semitism, and to eliminate every dollar of U.S. funding. When the enemy is inside the gates of the United Nations, America must be the one to call it by its name and destroy it. President Trump understood this, and Bezrat Hashem, we will return to that strategy soon. But you know as well as I that the enemy is inside more than just the gates of the United Nations. It is also in powerful Western institutions in my country and beyond, where the virus, the vile virus of anti-Semitism, is spreading. This is why total victory is not just physical self-defense, but ideological self-defense. As chair of the House Republican Conference, I'm proud that House Republicans have passed bipartisan resolutions in support of Israel, called out anti-Semitism in the halls of Congress, and brought transparency to the anti-Semitic propaganda pushed on American students and paid for by foreign adversaries. We have passed bills like the Deterrent Act to ensure our foreign enemies cannot poison the minds of American students. I also serve as a senior member of the Education and Workforce Committee, where I led the charge to expose this moral rot of anti-Semitism infecting our supposed most elite higher education institutions. When we heard from Jewish students, faculty members, and staff about anti-Semitic attacks taking place on their campuses, I demanded Congress host a public hearing to hold colleges and universities accountable for their failure to combat anti-Semitism and their failure to protect Jewish members of their community. And I know you all saw that hearing because the world saw that hearing. And I want to take you into that moment. My question was the last question of the hearing. The most junior member of the committee yielded me her remaining 3 minutes. And I had asked questions earlier in the hearing going back and forth with the president of Harvard, now former president, and I wasn't getting direct answers. So in thinking through the last question, which was not pre-written, I wrote down in pencil right ahead of time and thought to myself, how can I ask this in a straightforward, moral way to force them to answer correctly? And that question was, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct on bullying and harassment? And one after the other answered, quote, it depends on the context. And the world heard. Let me tell you, it does not depend on the context. And over the years, I've been in a lot of high-profile committee hearings, and I've never witnessed the moral bankruptcy and depravity of witnesses like I did in that hearing. In 1 week, there were over 1 billion views worldwide. It is now well into the multiple billions. And there is a reason that it is the most viewed testimony in the history of the United States Congress. And that is because it exposed the moral rot at the highest levels of these so-called elite universities. And as I said, after the resignations, 2 down, so many to go. That hearing set off an earthquake. Their disgraceful attempt to contextualize genocide of Jews is a symptom of decades of moral decay, intellectual laziness, and dangerous radical groupthink at these so-called elite institutions across society. We have put colleges and universities on notice and expanded this investigation to ensure every Jewish and Israeli student, faculty member, and staff member is protected on campus. We're looking at foreign donations to universities, the failure to protect Jewish students, the federal accreditation system, the assault on viewpoint diversity and free speech, the anti-Semitism inherent in woke DEI, the erosion in academic integrity, and the extent to which U.S. taxpayers have been forced to bankroll the political indoctrination of young Americans at these institutions. The days of unchecked anti-Semitism, of anti-Jewish racism must be over. We will hold the purveyors of the oldest hatred accountable. Ladies and gentlemen, this visit has renewed my sense of the stakes of the battle we are in. If I want to leave you with one message today, it's this. The majority of Americans support you, and we always will. Since President Truman's recognition of Israel 11 minutes after David Ben-Gurion declared Israel's independence 76 years and 5 days ago, America stands with Israel. We must not let the extremism in so-called elite corners conceal the deep, abiding love for Israel among the American people. Most Americans feel a strong connection to your people. They have opened their hearts to you in this dark hour. And I have seen it everywhere in conversations with my constituents, hardworking families, small business people, farmers, veterans, seniors, and students alike. And the reason for this love is no mystery to me. I was raised in upstate New York. I attended an all-girls day school right next door to a synagogue. I grew up attending B'nai Mitzvot of childhood and family friends and have been welcomed into many homes for Shabbat dinner. I've celebrated with my friends the birth of their children, attending baby namings and britot, and signing a ketubah at a friend's wedding. My love and respect for the Jewish people and the people of Israel is lifelong and deep. And I've been to Israel many times, even before I was a member of Congress. As a Harvard undergraduate, I made my first trip to Israel to study national security policy on a fellowship with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And I am pleased to say that I've been many times since, most recently returning as a member of Congress in May of last year to help lead an Intelligence Committee delegation meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. During each and every visit to Israel, I am reminded of the fundamental fact that our peoples share an enduring bond, forged over centuries. Both Jefferson and Lincoln called America, in one way or another, the last best hope on earth. When I come here to Jerusalem, I sense a shared destiny, one embedded in your national anthem, Hatikva, the hope. Israel is indeed a miracle, an outpost of freedom, of Western values, of civilization, a striking example of human potential, the physical embodiment of Herzl's maxim, if you will it, it is no dream. It's the same founding ethos that we prize in America, the American dream, which says that with hard work, the right values, you can build a life for yourself, your family, and your community. Herzl's dream and the American dream. These dreams are precious, and we must cherish, protect, and fight for them. We know we have difficult days ahead to ensure this always remains true. Prime Minister Netanyahu recently said that if Israel must stand alone, it will. I am here to tell you that it is our duty as Americans that Israel does not stand alone. We must never let Israel stand alone. I am confident in the end that our relationship will not just endure, but emerge stronger than ever before. Israel, keep fighting. We are with you. God bless Israel, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you for this tremendous honor.
Good morning, everyone. Under the failed far-left Democrat leadership of Joe Biden, our country is unrecognizable, and the American people know it. Once acclaimed colleges and universities have turned into chaos, fallen to brainwashed anti-Semitic groupthink, canceling commencements. Instead of protecting Jewish students, Joe Biden has pandered to the pro-Hamas wing of the Democrat Party. And campus leadership has shamefully followed suit, negotiating with these pro-Hamas terrorists and submitting to their demands, following Joe Biden's pattern of appeasement. These apologists for the anti-Semitic mob have turned the Democrat Party into the party of pro-Hamas, a party that defends calls for death to America heard across American campuses. As we laid out last week, House Republicans, under the leadership of Speaker Mike Johnson, are taking action. As part of this conference-wide investigation, we have two major hearings this week. The Oversight Committee is bringing Mayor Bowser and D.C. Chief of Police before Congress for answers regarding the anti-Semitic mob at GW's campus, and the Education and Workforce Committee will address anti-Semitism in K-12 schools. These schools must be held accountable. House Republicans will use every tool available to end this scourge of anti-Semitism that is destroying American education. Shifting to the House floor this week, House Republicans are continuing to lead and deliver for the American people, bringing legislation which protects America's consumers' rights, from their right to choose their home appliances to combating the SEC's burdensome regulations on crypto. We are joined today by our colleague and friend Debbie Lesko to discuss her bill, the Hands Off Our Home Appliances Act, which protects Americans from Joe Biden's failed far-left anti-American energy agenda. Debbie.
Expired. Let's go to the great state of New York again, where Representative Stefanik is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Banks, there's been many questions on Hillcrest, and I just want to make sure it's very clear for the record. The principal of Hillcrest High School is still employed by the Department of Education, correct?
Correct.
And what is his role?
He's serving in a role working on one of the teams under one of our deputy chancellors.
I am told that he's director of teacher development and evaluation. Is that accurate?
That I don't know his official title right here. I'd have to double check that.
That's concerning to me that you have him in a senior position. And what's very concerning about these hearings is that we're getting lip service, but a lack of enforcement, a lack of accountability. And these rules and policies matter, whether it's teachers, administrators, or students violating the rules. I want to switch to Origins High School. In October, 40 to 50 students marched through Origins High School chanting "Death to Israel" and "Kill the Jews." In addition, an independent investigation found that a teacher who teaches global history was told by a student, quote, "I wish you were killed." Another student called her, quote, "a dirty Jew," and the student said he wished Hitler could have hit more Jews, including her. What disciplinary actions have been taken against those students who chanted "Death to Israel" at Origins High School and against the student who harassed with anti-Semitic slurs that teacher?
Two things. First of all, when we've done our investigation, we have found no evidence that there was any movement through the hall saying "death to the Jews." We looked at, and I treat that very, very seriously. That was reported in the papers. We have found no evidence that that actually happened. What we have found are a wide range, deeply troubling anti-Semitic things that have happened at Origins High School. This is the one case that has troubled me the most, Congresswoman. I will tell you that.
So what are the enforcement actions?
I'm trying to tell you. We have in fact suspended a number of students at that school, but currently this case now is under litigation, and I'm being advised not to speak to the specific things that have happened there, but just know that I visited that school after these allegations have come up. I met with parents, family, staff, students. I'm deeply troubled by what has happened there, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. I can't say more because it is now under litigation.
You understand our concern, though, as policymakers, when we have witnesses testify, whether it's Columbia University, Penn, Harvard, or New York City Chancellor, when there is a lack of enforcement and accountability, that there is a set of rules, but that individuals who violate those rules are not held accountable.
We've held a lot of people accountable. That was part. You want to hear when I gave my opening statement.
But you didn't. You said you fired the principal, and it turns out the former principal
I never said I fired the principal.
You did. A member, you can check the testimony. Ms. McLean asked, you fired her. You said yes.
Fired the principal of who?
Hillcrest.
I never said I fired the principal of Hill. You check the record. I never said that.
I will check the record.
I said that we removed the principal.
Mr. Banks,
never said I fired the principal.
She said, has he been fired? You said yes, and then we moved on.
I did not say that.
You did?
Well,
you said he was removed.
I would beg to differ on that.
We now know, though, that he is still employed by the Department of Education.
He's no longer at the school. He's been
but he is
removed from
employed
his
by the
position
Department of
as
Education.
the principal of the school.
And now he
That's
is
not the same thing as terminated.
employed at the Department of Education. You testified to that.
Yes.
And you also said, I believe, we've been told he's Director of Teacher Development and Evaluation, and you're not sure if that's the case. Our expectation is we'll get an answer by the end of today, whether that's the case or not.
Absolutely.
My next question is, there have been multiple teacher-led anti-Israel walkouts during school time. What are the consequences for those teacher walkouts, and do those violate policy of DOE?
I'm not sure what teacher walkouts. We've had a number of walkouts of students out of school, including several of our high schools, which are also very troubling for me.
So what disciplinary action is taken in that case?
Right. The challenge that we have in that case is we do not have any rules within our code of conduct that would prevent a child from actually walking out of the school. When they walk out of the school, they are marked absent. They're essentially cutting from school. There are consequences for cutting school.
And it's your testimony
parents,
today that there's no teacher involvement in those walkouts? Because independent media reports say that there is teacher involvement in those walkouts.
I don't have any evidence of that. We have evidence of one where the principal assigned a teacher to go with a student to a protest, completely inappropriate. That principal was disciplined, the teacher was disciplined in that particular case.
What was the form of the discipline?
I'm not at liberty to tell you. It's very specific. They were not fired, but we have a wide range of discipline that takes place in those cases, and we did take action.
And my last question is, you had a teacher at Gotham Tech High School in Queens, and you've spoken out publicly against this. He posted images of a Hamas paraglider to his social media, repeatedly refers to so-called Israel. Again, this is highlighting a Hamas paraglider who slaughtered Jews. We all have seen the horrific footage, who cooked babies. These are terrorists. Horrible. What disciplinary action has taken against this teacher?
Again, action was taken. First of all, I want to just say, I think what that employee did, absolutely disgusting. Absolutely
but
disgusting.
What action?
And we took action.
What was the action?
I cannot give you the specifics on the action that was taken.
Yes, you can. You're in front of Congress. What is the action?
I cannot give you this on the specific employee. On this specific employee,
you can give us an answer. You're choosing not to. That's unacceptable.
Time has expired. Let's go to the great.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize Ms. Stefanik for 5 minutes.
Oh, I love being able to respond to the novice from New York. First of all, thank you so much for stating the obvious that political lawfare is in fact election interference. That's what we're seeing with the sham Alvin Bragg trial. Thank you also to the novice freshman member for New York, highlighting that withholding military aid to an ally for a political purpose, just like Joe Biden is doing to Israel. Always grateful for you stepping in it. Mr. Costello, in your opening statement, you said that in the over 50 years serving as a lawyer, you, quote, have never seen the types of politically motivated cases that have been brought in this presidential election season. These political cases are being used as a weapon of war to damage, defeat, or impede political adversaries and their allies. Instead of political warfare, it is lawfare, a cancer upon our collective judicial system. I want to begin with Alvin Bragg's weaponized sham trial in New York. Isn't it true that in Alvin Bragg's campaign for Manhattan DA, Bragg specifically ran on going after President Donald Trump?
That is true.
Isn't it true that Bragg's predecessor, Cy Vance, declined to prosecute President Trump?
That is true.
And the FEC also did not prosecute President Trump.
That is true.
And the DOJ did not prosecute President Trump in this case.
The DOJ referring to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District?
Correct.
Absolutely true.
And one of the reasons the Southern District of New York turned down this case was because the supposed star witness, according to Alvin Bragg, Michael Cohen, was totally, quote, unworthy of belief. Isn't that true?
Without a doubt.
This is the same Michael Cohen who pled guilty to 7 counts in an indictment that had absolutely nothing to do with President Trump and actually predated the first time he met President Trump, correct?
Absolutely true.
And in fact, this is the same Michael Cohen who perjured himself to Congress. Isn't that true?
Yes.
In fact, when called as a witness in this sham trial, Cohen was asked directly if he was honest during his testimony to Congress. He said no, admitting perjury. But it's not just Bragg's case that is a total sham and illegal political lawfare going after Joe Biden's top political opponent, Donald Trump. This rot goes deep all the way up to the top in the Oval Office. Because when Congress referred this admission of Cohen's perjury to Joe Biden's DOJ, isn't it true that the DOJ has refused to prosecute?
That is true.
Isn't it correct that Michael Colangelo, who was the 3rd highest ranking official in Biden's DOJ, was transferred to Bragg's office to run this weaponized prosecution of President Trump? Isn't that true?
Not only true, but it's unheard of.
Unheard of. It's a disgrace. Do you agree that this weaponization of lawfare goes straight to the top with the purpose of helping Joe Biden's failing presidential campaign?
The circumstantial evidence definitely supports that.
And the unconstitutional gag order on President Trump from New York Judge Merchant is unprecedented lawfare.
As far as I know, absolutely.
And let's go to the daughter of the judge. Isn't it true that she is raising millions of dollars off of this sham case?
Well, I have to say I've read that in the media. I don't know it of my own knowledge.
It is true.
Thank you.
One additional question. I want to talk about the rigged and unprecedented jury selection process. Isn't it true that Bragg's team asked the jurors if they followed Trump on social media?
Yes.
And isn't it true that they did not ask any of the potential jurors if they followed Biden on social media?
Or Michael Cohen.
Or Michael
Yes.
Cohen.
Yeah.
And isn't it true that 87% of the jurors said they voted for Joe Biden?
That's true,
Is this unprecedented and lawfare jury shopping?
without a doubt.
Without a doubt. Political lawfare for the purpose of election interference to go after Donald Trump. Do you agree?
Totally.
This is one of the reasons that Trump's polls continue to skyrocket, and it's why President Trump will win in 2024 to end the illegal and warped weaponization of the justice system, because if they can illegally go after Trump, they can go after anyone. I yield back.
Generally yields back.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here today. This week, House Republicans are commemorating National Police Week to honor our men and women in blue, as well as their families who sacrifice so much for our communities across America. Every single day, our brave law enforcement heroes put their lives on the line to ensure law and order across the country. But under Joe Biden and far-left failed leadership, the safety of America's law enforcement has been sacrificed for the sake of the Democrats' pro-criminal agenda. Lawless liberals handicap our police from doing their jobs with failed bail reform, like my home state in New York, and pro-criminal policies that appease the far-left Democrats' defund the police agenda. Now more than ever, Republicans recognize the need to fight for our police and against the far-left extremist anti-police movement. Republicans have and always will proudly back the blue. This week, we will bring to the House floor a series of bills to ensure that law enforcement has the tools and resources needed to preserve law and order. Today, we are honored to be joined by several of our colleagues who previously served in law enforcement and have great legislation on the floor this week. Their voices are so incredibly important to our House Republican Conference. We are also joined by two special guests, Sheriff Chad Bianco of Riverside County in California, representing the major county sheriffs of America, and we're also joined by the president of the National Fraternal Order of Police, Patrick Yos. Thank you so much to our special guests for joining us. I want to first hand it over to Sheriff Bianco from California. Sheriff, come on up.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize Ms. Stefanik for 5 minutes.
Oh, I love being able to respond to the novice from New York. First of all, thank you so much for stating the obvious that political lawfare is in fact election interference. That's what we're seeing with the sham Alvin Bragg trial. Thank you also to the novice freshman member for New York, highlighting that withholding military aid to an ally for a political purpose, just like Joe Biden is doing to Israel. Always grateful for you stepping in it. Mr. Costello, in your opening statement, you said that in the over 50 years serving as a lawyer, you, quote, have never seen the types of politically motivated cases that have been brought in this presidential election season. These political cases are being used as a weapon of war to damage, defeat, or impede political adversaries and their allies. Instead of political warfare, it is lawfare, a cancer upon our collective judicial system. I want to Thank you, Whip Emmer. Just a brief comment on the breaking news this morning. We continue to see unprecedented and illegal lawfare against President Trump, whether it's the sham Alvin Bragg trial in New York City or the weaponized DOJ. Joe Biden disregarded over 250 years of constitutional executive privilege when he orchestrated an unprecedented raid on President Trump's home to obtain presidential records that President Trump was allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. Now, Joe Biden is hiding behind executive privilege to prevent the American public from hearing how he knowingly mishandled classified intelligence for personal financial gain. On Israel, the lack of leadership we're seeing from the Democrat Party led by Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer is disgraceful. They have turned their backs on supporting our most precious ally, Israel, in a time of existential need, instead choosing to placate the far-left Democrat radicals who are now the anti-Semitic political base of their party. Schumer, time and time again, vehemently blocked our Israel aid package and publicly rebuked Prime Minister Netanyahu, the leader of an ally at war. Meanwhile, Joe Biden has done everything in his power to give Iran and its terrorist proxies the green light to escalate attacks, withholding critical aid, pressuring Israel to surrender, and continuing Biden's failed foreign policy of appeasement. At every opportunity, Joe Biden has failed to support Israel. Under Joe Biden, our adversaries no longer fear us, and our allies cannot rely on us. If Joe Biden wanted to ensure Israel could defend itself, he would, yet he refuses. The American people will judge Joe Biden for this failure, and history will judge Joe Biden for this failure as well. House Republicans will not be deterred. We will put this legislation on the floor this week. We will put President Trump back in the White House, grow our majority, take the Senate, and together Republicans will always stand with Israel and its right to exist. And I'm proud to turn it back over to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Good morning. Tomorrow, House Republicans are honored to host at our special political conference President Donald J. Trump, where we will discuss how Republicans will work together to save America from Joe Biden and far-left Democrats' failed leadership that has caused skyrocketing and painful Bidenflation, the historic Biden border crisis, surging violent crime, a weakened national security, and chaos around the world. This week on the floor, House Republicans are delivering on our promise to hold the Biden administration accountable when we bring to the floor our resolution to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress for refusing to comply with our subpoena and release the audio recordings of Joe Biden's interview with Special Counsel Robert Hur. It's time for Merrick Garland to stop stonewalling and release the Biden tapes. Additionally, we will bring to the floor the National Defense Bill for FY25. And as a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee, I'm proud to have helped craft this legislation, securing critical wins for my home district for Fort Drum, the 10th Mountain Division, and all of upstate New York. This bill also includes significant investments in emerging technology, provides for our military families, equips our service members with modern capabilities and platforms as they fight to protect our nation and deter our adversaries. I also want to quickly touch upon yesterday's deposition of corrupt former disgraced New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, whose fatal nursing home order resulted in the deaths of over 15,000 innocent seniors dying in nursing homes. This was a long overdue step for those families who are still mourning the loss of their loved ones in New York State. We will continue to fight to deliver justice and accountability and answers for those families who are still grieving. Thank you to Chairman Brad Wenstrup of the Select Committee for making yesterday possible. With that, I'm honored to be joined by my colleagues today, and I want to turn it over to Mark Alford, who will be talking about the National Defense Bill. Mark Alford from Missouri.
President Schill, you said there's been a wide range of discipline. After testifying, there have been 0 suspensions, 0 expulsions, and you said discipline has been meted out. How has discipline been meted out?
Discipline has run the gamut. That is the discipline that's already completed. Run the gamut from meetings with student affairs staff at the very lowest level of severity up to disciplinary probation, which means if there is another offense, students will be expelled or suspended.
And you testified when I asked about the Deering Meadows Agreement with the visiting Palestinian faculty members. Isn't it true that the university committed to fundraise above and beyond its current commitment as part of the Deering Meadows Agreement?
I did not commit. I don't know who told you that.
Well, I'm reading it from the statement put out by the university that says, quote, the university commits to fundraise to sustain this program beyond this current commitment, end quote. I'm reading your words put out by your office.
That is a program that is not just about the Middle East. That is a program that is about war-torn areas all across this world.
But
so Ukraine,
isn't it a
for
fact,
example, would be
isn't
included.
it a fact that that was part of the agreement to increase the commitment to that?
I don't think the agreement increased the commitment.
It did. I'm reading it for you. You put this out from your office. Quote, the university commits to fundraise to sustain this program beyond this current commitment. Is that no longer part of the Deering Meadows agreement?
When I hear beyond this commitment,
I'm reading what your office put out.
Are you asking me to interpret what my
No,
office
I'm asking
put out,
you,
or are
isn't
you
that the
just
fact?
reading it?
What does beyond this current commitment mean?
What I read that to be is beyond this current commitment, the rest of the world and over time.
That's not, it's specifically focused on the Palestinian faculty members. Let me ask you this.
But we're also going to be including Israeli faculty members.
It doesn't say that
and
in the
Israeli-
commitment. Why didn't you include Israeli faculty members when you put out the Deering Meadows agreement?
Because the Deering Meadows agreement, which actually I never called it that, but the Deering Meadows agreement was just a framework of an agreement that was reached with students at 4 o'clock in the morning.
At the pro-Hamas encampment.
If you would like to see the entire program, go on our website, and that will explain it to you, and you will see
No, I'm
it doesn't
asking you about
violate
what the
Title
university
VI.
put out. There is no mention of Israeli students or Israeli faculty. Isn't that the case?
In the agreement that we reached, that there wasn't Israeli students there or Jewish students
Because they weren't
there.
consulted. Isn't that the fact? Jewish and Israeli students were not consulted.
Jewish and Israeli students were not consulted with
Exactly.
respect to
Yield
the
back.
agreement.
Exactly.
And it would
Yield
have been
back.
impractical to do that,
expired.
Representative Stefanik, with all respect.
Dr. Adams, you're recognized for. Thank you, Ms. Bonamici. Ms. Stefanik, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
President Schill, the ADL released its report card for universities' responses to anti-Semitism, and you're aware that Northwestern was the only university whose grade was downgraded, correct?
Yes, I am aware of that.
And isn't it also true that the Northwestern earned an F for your failure to respond and combat anti-Semitism, and they called for your resignation? Is that correct?
I have great respect for the ADL.
I'm not asking your respect for the ADL. I'm asking, is it a fact that you earned an F and they called for your resignation?
I have great respect for the ADL. I am sad that they gave Northwestern
But
an
it's
F.
true. You got an F. Yes. Moving on. Let me tell you why you earned an F. I want to discuss what has been referred to as the Deering Meadows Agreement, your unilateral capitulation to the pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic encampment. But let's talk about what has occurred on this encampment. Isn't it true that a Jewish Northwestern student was assaulted?
So I want to question the premise of your question.
No. I'm asking the questions. You're answering. Wasn't
My
it true?
answer
No.
is it is not a capitulation.
I'm asking the question. You're required to answer. Isn't it true that a Jewish Northwestern student was assaulted?
There are allegations that a Jewish student was assaulted. We are investigating those allegations.
Isn't it true that a Jewish student was verbally harassed and stalked to Hillel?
There are allegations of that sort, and we are investigating them.
Isn't it true that a Jewish student wearing a yarmulke was spat on?
All of these are allegations that are being investigated.
How long are these investigations going to occur?
Well, if you remember, the encampment was up just a few weeks ago. So we believe at Northwestern in due process. We believe in investigations. We believe.
So when are the investigations going to be finalized?
I'm not going to be able to tell you that. They'll be finalized when the Conduct Office and the Title VI Office, which are well on this issue.
This is why you've earned an F. Isn't it true that a Jewish student was told to, quote, go back to Germany and get gassed, end quote?
I've heard that alleged. Again, it is being investigated. We will investigate any claim of discrimination or harassment.
But it is a fact. You said that there have been 0 suspensions, 0 expulsions.
Thus far, with lots of investigations on their way.
You said something that was very important. You said we did not give in to demands, but the commitments we made as part of the Deering Meadows Agreement. You said the word commitments. Let me talk about those commitments. One of those commitments was funding 2 visiting Palestinian faculty for 2 years. Is that true?
This is part of a program that we have had. We have used it with Afghanistan, Ukraine. It's for war-torn
But isn't it true? I'm asking
countries.
you. Okay. The other one is you will fund the full cost for 5 Palestinian undergrads.
That is also part of the program sponsored by our Buffett Institute. It is not a new program. It exists for people
But it was
whose
announced
education and research
it was
has been
announced
interrupted.
as part of the Deering Meadows Agreement. Is that correct?
It was part of it was a goal set forth in the Deering Meadow Agreement. It will also include
And who was
people from Israel.
consulted? Who was consulted when you embarked on the Deering Meadows Agreement? Was the President's Advisory Committee on Preventing Anti-Semitism and Hate consulted?
That was not within the purview of the anti-Semitism
So they were
and
not
other
consulted.
forms of hate committee.
Was Northwestern's Board of Trustees consulted?
The chair of our board was consulted.
But not the entire Board of Trustees.
Our Board of Trustees has over 120 members.
And isn't it a fact that members of the Board of Trustees expressed dissatisfaction with your failure to consult them?
There's been some members of our Board of Trustees who have expressed dissatisfaction that they were not part of the decision-making.
Did you consult with the General Counsel of Northwestern or an outside counsel on the Deering Meadows Agreement before it was agreed to?
Yes.
Are you aware that board members asked you this question and you said that you had not
Not
consulted?
the outside counsel. The general counsel of the university was part of my team managing this problem.
Did you consult with 2 members of the advisory committee that I referenced previously, the anti-Israel professor Jessica Winiger and the Kellogg professor Noor Katili? Were they consulted on the Deering Meadows Agreement?
I consulted with several members, including them, but also including the Hillel director, and also including the
Let's
chair
talk about
of
the
the
Hillel
committee.
director consultation. Isn't it true that you asked the Hillel director whether it was possible to hire an anti-Zionist Hillel, head of Hillel, rabbi?
I did not. I absolutely did not. I would never hire anyone based upon their views of being Zionist or anti-Zionist. That is not what I do. That's not what
That's
a great
not according to the
university
whistleblowers
does.
that have come forward to this committee.
I can't say who has talked to you or not talked to you, but I can tell you
I can assure you
the
many people
truth.
have spoke to this committee.
Thank you.
Good morning. Last week's verdict in New York shows how corrupt, rigged, and un-American the weaponized justice system has become under Joe Biden and Democrats. The facts are clear. This was a zombie case illegally brought forward by a corrupt prosecutor doing Joe Biden's political bidding in a desperate attempt to save Joe Biden's failing and catastrophic campaign. The case hinged on the testimony of a convicted felon who was disbarred for lying and perjured himself to Congress. This sham trial was overseen by a corrupt and highly unethical judge who is a Biden donor and whose own family has directly profited from this case. This corrupt Democrat judge imposed a clearly unconstitutional gag order on President Trump and his team. The prosecution team that brought forward this case consisted of a Soros-funded far-left Democrat district attorney on a vendetta, Democrat political operatives, and Democrat donors. We must work and are committed to working around the clock to ensure President Trump is victorious this November to save America from Biden's failed far-left Democrat agenda and this illegal weaponization of the justice system against the American people. This week, on the floor, House Republicans will deliver for our veterans and continue our steadfast support for our most precious ally, Israel. At every opportunity, Joe Biden has turned his back on Israel, most recently refusing to sanction the International Criminal Court following their politically motivated targeting of Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. The ICC must be immediately sanctioned. That is why today House Republicans will bring Chip Roy's bill, the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act, to the House floor to ensure needed guardrails to protect Israel and all our allies from baseless, undemocratic attacks by the international bureaucrats of this illegitimate court. We will also bring up the Milcon VA appropriations bill to fully fund veterans programs and benefits and prohibit the Biden administration from funding woke priorities. I'm proud to announce that following many years of advocacy, this legislation will also secure Fort Drum in upstate New York in my district as the third missile defense site on the East Coast, ensuring our policy of peace through strength by bolstering our nation's defense. With that, we have two special guests today, Congressman Michael Guest, who serves on the Milcon VA Appropriations Subcommittee, and we also have Congressman Juan Ciscomani from Arizona to discuss the impact of the Biden border crisis. We will begin with Michael Guest from Mississippi. President Trump. I also wanted to note yesterday, House Republicans released a report exposing Joe Biden and his campaign's illegal and unconstitutional collusion with 51 disgraced former intelligence officials, including signatories of the statement that were actively contracted with the CIA, and the weaponization was at the highest levels of the CIA to cover up the Hunter Biden laptop story. House Republicans will continue to expose this blatant and illegal weaponization of the federal government and hold both Joe Biden and his administration accountable through our constitutionally mandated role of oversight. Tomorrow, Commander-in-Chief. But the good news is the American people will save this country, and we are going to elect President Trump this November. So overwhelming win for President Trump.
And Biden is going to New York tomorrow. Do you think he's going to have a good welcome? What do you think about this trip?
Democrats are in full panic mode. No matter who you talk to across the country, no matter how desperately they try to spin this, coming up with excuses, which they're already doing, it was a bad night for Joe Biden, and this is a bad presidency, and the American people see that. And New York, what's interesting is President Trump pulled just 6 points behind in New York. That gap is still going to close. This is a traditional blue state that the momentum is moving in President Trump's direction. We picked up those 5 congressional seats in New York, and he's going to do very well on the ballot in New York State.
And then one more. Nikki Haley just tweeted that it's time to replace Joe Biden. They're going to replace him. But I heard you say that they're not going to, that he's going to be the Democratic nominee. Do you think there's no chance of them doing something right before the DNC?
Look, Joe Biden is on the ballot this November. We will defeat Joe Biden. Democrats, they are getting desperate because they know what a disaster it was, including Biden insiders and Biden campaign people who have told folks on background that it's been a disaster and avoided the spin room because they know it was just a historic failure for Joe Biden. But look, Donald Trump is going to defeat Joe Biden. Joe Biden is the sitting president of the United States, and Donald Trump's going to beat him this November.
One question here.
I mean, it's desperate. It's full-time panic mode for Democrats. That first 20 minutes when Joe Biden froze up, it's clear he's unfit to be president of the United States. He's unfit to be an elected official or any big professional responsibility. And the American people saw that on stark display.
What was it like inside the watch party tonight? You were with several other potential VP contenders. How did you guys interact with each other, and what were some moments that stood out inside tonight?
We're all friends. I know all the other names that are in the mix. I've worked with all of them. I've known some of them for a long time. Went to college with Vivek. I've worked with Tim Scott, with Marco on many issues, with JD, have gotten to know Doug Burgum. So it's a team effort. We're all working very hard to support President Trump, and we're proud to serve as surrogates. And I know that we're all great friends. What was clear in that room was just watching the failure of Joe Biden, those first 20 minutes that were just catastrophic for Joe Biden. He is unfit to be commander-in-chief versus the strength of President Trump, who was able to talk about so much of his effective policies, whether it was border security, whether it was economic growth, whether it was peace through strength when it comes to national security, foreign policy issues.
Was there anything you heard President Trump honed in on more?
I'm sorry?
Was there anything you hope that President Trump honed in on more during the debate, or anything you wish he did better?
You know, I would say the moderators did a very good job asking questions, and I was hesitant with CNN, which is very biased in their coverage of President Trump, very biased in how they interview all Republicans, but their questions were good questions. They were policy questions, and they let the candidates answer the questions without editorializing. I think that's very important to have an effective, good debate for the American people to see. So I think that, President Trump had the opportunity to talk about all the issues, and I'm looking forward to him continuing to communicate with the American people, which he loves doing, versus they have to hide Joe Biden. If this is what Joe Biden, this is his performance after a week of being in debate camp, that's catastrophic for him and embarrassment.
Elise, we'll do Reuters.
Okay, one question. You mentioned a lot of questions, a lot of topics. Something
I'm good.
Tomorrow, all eyes will be on Georgia, where the American people will hear directly from President Trump as well as President Joe Biden in the first debate. It will be clear to the American people that President Trump's America First agenda delivered the securest border in our nation's history, a booming economy helping families, small business, manufacturers, and farms, American energy independence, and peace through strength. Compare that to today, Joe Biden's feckless, failed, and catastrophically weak record. With that, we're honored to be joined by... Good morning. There is no longer any doubt that Joe Biden is unfit to be our commander-in-chief. The Biden White House, far-left House Democrats, and the mainstream media are in complete disarray because they know this to be true and have been caught participating in one of the greatest media cover-ups in American history. For the last 3.5 years, House Republicans and the American people have been demanding details about Joe Biden's mental and physical decline. But every time we raise these legitimate concerns, far-left Democrats and their loyal stenographers in the mainstream media rushed to Biden's defense, claiming that the clearly diminished Joe Biden was as sharp as ever and accusing us of peddling conspiracy theories. The cover-up is over and accountability is here. For years, House Republicans have known that Joe Biden is unfit for office. We also know that he will go to any lengths to maintain his grip on power. This is why it is so crucial that we take every possible measure to ensure that the 2024 presidential election is free from election interference and is constitutional. As part of that ongoing effort, House Republicans are bringing to the floor this week Congressman Chip Roy's Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, which requires individuals to provide proof of citizenship when registering to vote in federal elections. Not surprisingly, the Biden White House, whose far-left open border agenda has let in millions, over 10 million illegal immigrants, is against our bill. This is a very simple and logical concept rooted in the Constitution. Only American citizens should vote in American elections. Also this week, House Republicans are moving Mary Miller's CRA to stop Joe Biden's radical efforts to roll back women's rights and change Title IX to allow biological men to access women and girls' bathrooms, locker rooms, and sports. Next week, we are looking forward to uniting in Milwaukee behind President Donald J. Trump's America First agenda, which created the greatest economy in generations, the securest border in modern history, the lowest gas prices in years, and peace through strength around the world. With that, we're honored to be joined by Chip Roy, who is leading the SAVE Act this week on the floor. Chip.
Good evening, Milwaukee. We always say that this is the most important election in our lifetime, but we know deep down this one truly is. Our Constitution and the soul of our very nation are on the ballot. Under Joe Biden, the American people have suffered crisis after crisis. From the Biden border, the most wide-open border in our nation's history, to Bidenflation, the highest rate of inflation in my lifetime, devastating hardworking families with skyrocketing prices for groceries, gas, and utilities. To Biden's violent crime crisis, fueled by Democrats' pro-criminal sanctuary cities and defund the police policies like we have seen in my home state of New York. All while corrupt Democrat prosecutors and judges wage illegal and unconstitutional lawfare against President Trump in an effort to do Joe Biden's political bidding. And around the world, the feckless and failed Joe Biden has caused chaos, weakening our national security. From the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, to Putin's invasion of Ukraine, to Hamas's terrorist attack against our most precious ally, Israel. And let me ask you a question. What has been the response from the radical left on our college campuses? Vile anti-Semitism, chanting death to Israel, Death to Jews, death to America. This is Joe Biden's Democrat Party. Who saw that congressional hearing with the college presidents of so-called elite universities? Oh, wait, they are former presidents. You know, I asked one simple question at that hearing. It was not a political question. It was a moral question, and that was this. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct? And one after the other said it depends on the context. Let me tell you, America knows it does not depend on the context. President Trump will bring back moral leadership to the White House, condemning anti-Semitism and standing strong with Israel and the Jewish people. President Trump will once again deliver the most secure border in our nation's history and unleash the American economy. And he will bring peace through strength as Commander-in-Chief, standing with our allies and causing our enemies to fear us. President Trump has done it before, and he will do it again. This November, we are counting on you, we the people, to save America by electing President Donald J. Trump. It is clear for the whole world to see nothing, absolutely nothing will stop President Trump from standing and fighting for our great country. And I have been proud to always stand in the breach during the toughest moments for President Trump, from leading the charge against illegal impeachments, to standing for election integrity, to unifying House Republicans, to proudly being the first member of Congress to endorse him for re-election. And as we embark on the difficult path ahead to save America, call upon Galatians 6:9. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. We the people will never give up on President Trump, and we will never give up on the United States of America. God bless you, God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless the United States of America.
Good morning. Last week in Milwaukee was the most exciting, unifying, and strongest Republican convention in modern political history. The American people are rallying around President Donald J. Trump and his America First agenda. Compare that to the Democrat Party that is in absolute freefall. Backroom donors, Democrat elites, and their stenographers in the mainstream media conspired in a direct attack on democracy, which overturned the will of 14 million Democrat voters who elected Joe Biden as their nominee. And make no mistake, the American people know that Kamala Harris owns Joe Biden's catastrophic and failed policies, from the inflation crisis to the energy crisis to the crime crisis. And the number one issue facing Americans, no matter what district across America, is the border crisis. And Kamala Harris is Joe Biden's open border czar. By every metric, Harris has failed to secure our borders, advancing far-left Democrats' failed open border policies and the needs of illegals over the safety of American citizens. Yesterday, I introduced a resolution condemning Kamala Harris's role as Biden's open border czar. Every elected Democrat is responsible for this border crisis, along with every other aspect of Biden's failed and feckless record, which brought skyrocketing Biden inflation, surging violent crimes, chaos, and weakness around the world. Looking to tomorrow, at the Speaker's invitation, we will proudly welcome Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address Congress. This address comes at a time when Israel is fighting against barbarous terrorists backed by Iran for their very right to exist. House Republicans will always stand with Israel and will not rest until every hostage kidnapped during the horrific October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks is returned home. While we have House Republicans have repeatedly voted in favor of providing Israel with necessary military aid, the Biden-Harris administration and far-left Democrats have turned their backs on our most precious ally, electing to withhold this aid and side with the radical pro-terrorist base of today's Democrat Party. It has never been more crucial to show the world that America stands unequivocally with our most precious ally, Israel. It has been 10 days since the horrific assassination attempt on President Trump. Yesterday, we heard from the Secret Service Director, Cheadle, who provided no new updates, was unable to answer the most basic questions, and confirmed to everyone that she is not qualified to keep our nation's leaders safe. She must resign. The American people deserve answers, and House Republicans will not rest until we have transparency and accountability. Today, we are joined by my fellow New Yorker and Oversight Committee member, Nick Langworthy, who traveled to Butler, Pennsylvania to see it firsthand. He is helping to lead the charge demanding accountability from the Secret Service. Nick.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as she may consume to our esteemed conference chair and the author of this resolution, the gentlelady from New York, Congresswoman Stefanik.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I rise to condemn Vice President Kamala Harris for her failed and dangerous policies as Joe Biden's border czar that caused the most catastrophic border crisis in modern history. No matter what congressional district you go to, the number one issue facing Americans is Kamala Harris's open border crisis. And by every metric, Kamala Harris has failed to secure our borders, instead advancing far-left Democrats' failed open border policies and the needs of illegal immigrants over the safety of Americans. This resolution condemns Kamala Harris's role as Joe Biden's open border czar and affirms that the American people deserve elected officials who understand the gravity of the crisis at the border and who will work to secure the border. Now, Democrats will try to run from this record, but they cannot hide. Joe Biden's open border czar, Kamala Harris, and every elected Democrat is responsible for this border crisis, along with every other aspect of Joe Biden's failed and feckless record, which brought not only the border crisis, but skyrocketing Bidenflation, surging violent crimes, chaos, and weakness around the world. We all remember the widely publicized delegation that Vice President Kamala Harris conducted and led, saying, "Do not come, do not come." And millions of illegals poured into our country since then because of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's administration's unconstitutional, illegal executive actions, wiping away President Trump's effective border security policies, which created the most secure border in modern history. The American people know that. In fact, just last month, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection announced over 130,000 illegal immigrant encounters at our southern border in June. This is roughly 4,300 illegal encounters at our southern border a day, which is 4 times more than the definition of a crisis set by Obama's DHS Secretary Jay Johnson. So far this fiscal year, there have been 93 individuals whose names appear on the terrorist watch list who were stopped trying to enter the U.S. illegally between ports of entry at the southern border. That's over 500 since Kamala Harris was assigned the border czar role. And on our northern border, in the Swanton sector, which I represent, I have seen firsthand with the Border Patrol the disastrous consequences of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's administration's failed far-left open border agenda, which caused a historic surge in illegal crossings, the likes of which we have never seen on our northern border before, including individuals on the terrorist watch list. And this is not just a national security crisis, it is a humanitarian crisis. Under Kamala Harris's role as Joe Biden's border czar, nearly 80,000 minors have been lost, left, slipped through the cracks. This is also part of the violent crime crisis surge concerning every single American. Look in upstate New York. A 21-year-old innocent girl was killed by an illegal and buried in a Syracuse public park. A 15-year-old innocent girl was raped by an illegal in Albany County, all because of Kamala Harris's failed policies as open borders are. Make no mistake, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are to blame for this historic crisis. Their policies stopped the construction of the border wall, ended President Trump's remain in Mexico, and released the largest number of illegals into the United States in history. Since Kamala Harris became the open border czar, monthly encounters have surpassed even the highest month under President Trump. The number of illegals released into the country have skyrocketed. Former U.S. Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz stated that during his 2 years in the position, he had never once spoken to Vice President Harris. Even worse, Vice President Harris has never even spoken with the current Border Patrol chief since he was appointed in July 2023. This is unacceptable. The American people have had enough. They know that the only way to fix this historic crisis is by returning to President Trump's effective border security policies. That is why House Republicans passed H.R. 2, the strongest border security bill in history, the Secure the Border Act of 2023, that will put an end to this catastrophic border crisis caused by Joe Biden and his open border czar, Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has failed in overseeing American safety by refusing to secure the border. She has proved that she is unfit to lead, and I strongly urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this resolution. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise today in support of my bipartisan legislation, the Countering CCP Drones Act. First, I want to thank Chairwoman Kathy McMorris Rogers, Chairman Latta, Ranking Member Pallone, and the Energy and Commerce Committee for their bipartisan support of this legislation and others that seek to end Communist China's malign influence in America. Additionally, I want to thank my colleague, Majority Leader Scalise, for bringing these bills to the floor that clearly demonstrate that House Republicans will continue to lead in countering Communist China. The Chinese Communist Party is working to undermine American sovereignty by forcing Americans to rely and depend on unsecure Communist Chinese technology. Nowhere is this more evident than in the drone industry. In 2015, the CCP launched the Made in China 2025 initiative, which leveraged aggressive subsidies, direct CCP investment, and unfair trade practices to artificially drive down the cost of Chinese manufactured drones, undercutting American companies and ensuring the rest of the world was forced to rely on Communist China for unsecured drone technology. Due to these authoritarian policies, America has been flooded with drones manufactured by CCP-controlled drone company DJI. Allowing artificially cheap DJI drones to monopolize our skies has decimated American drone manufacturing and given our greatest strategic adversary eyes in our skies. Over the last 7 years, the U.S. government has publicly confirmed time and time again that DJI drones are being used to collect information on U.S. critical infrastructure and pose significant risks to U.S. national security. Moreover, DJI is on the U.S. Department of Defense list of Chinese military companies because it directly advances the modernization efforts of the People's Liberation Army. Not only does DJI improve the equipment of our greatest strategic adversary, which could one day be used against U.S. service members, they also actively aid the CCP in carrying out genocidal crimes against ethnic minorities. It is past time we end Communist China's role as the world's drone factory. My legislation, the Countering CCP Drones Act, will place DJI on the FCC's covered list, which will prohibit new models of DJI drones from operating in America. This will initiate a much-needed transition period to improve the competitiveness of U.S. drone companies, remove Chinese spy drones from our skies, and end our reliance on CCP-manufactured drones. For too long, we have allowed Communist China leverage over our critical industries through their malign drone monopoly.
As drones become increasingly integrated into our military, law enforcement, agriculture, and critical infrastructure, the U.S. must build our domestic manufacturing capabilities. Make no mistake, Communist China will use the successes of its Made in China 2025 initiative to undercut American global leadership and domestic security. We have 3 months to reverse the course of these successes. The passage of my Countering CCP Drones Act is a critical step in that direction. I urge all of my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back.
Welcome back. During the August district work period, Democrats used their convention to overturn the will of 14 million Democrat primary voters to anoint Kamala Harris, a failed and weak vice president and the most liberal United States senator when she was in the Senate. This was in a desperate attempt to salvage their failing presidential ticket, and there was nothing more undemocratic than having far-left liberal elites anoint their preferred candidate without a single primary vote being cast. But Kamala cannot hide forever. Tonight, at the debate, the country will finally get to see the stark contrast between the strength and success of President Trump's America First policies and the devastation and weakness of Kamala Harris's radical, failed far-left agenda. While I was in my home district this August, my constituents made one thing abundantly clear. They are struggling because of the crises Kamala's policies have created. They are facing the highest inflation of a lifetime because of failed Kamala economics. They're facing a raging border crisis that has devastated American communities because of Kamala Harris's role as Joe Biden's open borders are. And they are seeing a weak foreign policy that has plunged the world into a state of chaos. We cannot afford 4 more years of failure and weakness under Kamala Harris. On the floor this week, House Republicans will bring a series of bills to combat the Biden-Harris failed foreign policy of appeasement that has emboldened our adversaries like Communist China. I also want to briefly touch on this afternoon's Oversight Committee hearing, where I will join members of the Select Committee on COVID to demand long overdue answers from disgraced former Governor Andrew Cuomo on behalf of the families who lost loved ones as a result of his fatal nursing home directive. Yesterday, the Select Committee released a report detailing that disgraced Governor Cuomo himself and his most senior aides ordered, directed, and executed the deadly nursing home executive order, killing over 15,000 vulnerable seniors, confirming what hardworking New Yorkers have known for years. This bombshell testimony also reveals that the disgraced former governor and his top aides were caught covering up their culpability and guilt in an attempt to selfishly save their shredded reputations. There is no question that Andrew Cuomo is responsible for the deaths of innocent nursing home seniors. I want to turn it over to Chairman John Molinar, who's going to talk about many of the bills we have on the floor this week, and then we're going to hear from our Foreign Affairs Chair, Mike McCall, and the rest of leadership. I'm going to start with John Molinar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Wenstrup. Today is long overdue. And just as a reminder for the public tuning in, we are here today on behalf of the over 15,000 vulnerable seniors in nursing homes who died because of Governor Cuomo's fatal executive order on March 25th, damning them to this horrible fate, including constituents in my district and every congressional district in New York State. I also want to recognize the families and advocates who have been working tirelessly on behalf of their loved ones amidst this grief, who have been smeared, attacked, and denigrated by Governor Cuomo and his most senior aides. Let me begin first. After months of inquiry and investigation, we now know irrefutably what New Yorkers have known for years, that Governor Cuomo himself and his most senior aides ordered, directed, and executed this deadly executive order counter to CMS and CDC guidance. Our investigation also reveals, a bipartisan investigation, that the disgraced former governor and his top aides were caught covering up their culpability and guilt to selfishly save their shredded reputations. I want to start with the March 25th directive. Isn't it correct, former governor, that Dr. Zucker served as your commissioner of health during the COVID crisis?
Yes.
And you have stated and shared that you have great respect for Dr. Zucker's work and professionalism. You have said that in the past. Is that correct?
I don't know if I've used those words, but I'll take your word for it.
Do you have respect for Dr. Zucker and his professionalism? Yes. Are you aware that Dr. Zucker testified that the March directive was prompted by a direct request to you, former Governor Cuomo, from the Greater New York Hospital Association? Are you aware of that fact?
I'm not aware of his testimony, no.
Well, that was what he testified to this committee. Dr. Zucker also went on to say, quote, Greater New York Hospital Association called the governor and the team. We were all there in a conversation, end quote. I also want to add, are you aware that another staffer at the Department of Health testified that the March 25th order did receive sign-off from the executive chamber? Are you aware of that fact?
No, I'm aware of the testimony to the exact opposite that you received.
That is incorrect. He said, yes, absolutely.
That's not the testimony that I have before me.
The testimony
Mr.
I have
Hutton,
before me, when he was asked whether the March 25th order was signed off by the executive chamber, the answer was yes, absolutely. And on top of that, Dr. Zucker testified that, quote, everything goes through the governor's office. And by the way, Governor, you and I both know that under your terrible leadership in New York, everything does go through the governor's office. My follow-up is it wasn't just the directive itself, Governor, it was the cover-up. This investigation found that you, former governor, and your most senior aides made a deliberate decision to exclude certain COVID-19 related nursing home deaths to hide and undercount the actual mortality rate in nursing homes. And for the public, Governor Cuomo changed the methodology of counting nursing home fatalities to exclude out-of-facility deaths, to undercount those. I want to ask you, what period of time were you negotiating for your book deal?
Congresswoman, if there was a fact in what you said...
No, I'm asking you a question.
I'm
asking you a question. What dates did you negotiate for your book deal? That is the question before you today.
I'm answering a question that
No.
asked.
The question that I asked...
My testimony says, during that time, did you have any discussions with the executive chamber regarding the need for guidance?
That's not the testimony I'm referring to.
Recall.
Absolutely was the answer. Governor, absolutely. You're throwing your staff under the bus. You are culpable for this. My question to you is, when were you negotiating for your multi-million-dollar advance deal for your book as seniors were dying in nursing homes? That is the question in front of you.
You can't make up facts, Congresswoman.
You're the one making up facts. You're the one who undercounted nursing home deaths. You're the one who I want to ask right now. You apologize today, but there are families sitting here. I want you to turn around, look them in the eye, and apologize, which you have failed to do. Will you do it?
This is not about political theater. It's
no,
about
this is about
answers.
Accountability.
Why did 1.2 million Americans die? Why did more Americans die than any country on the globe?
You're the former governor who's disgraced under oath.
Lie to the people of the United States.
This executive order was under your name. It was counter to CDC and CMS.
Let President Trump lie?
This is about those seniors, Governor. They deserve to hear from you in the eye that you apologize, that you were negotiating for a multi-million-dollar book deal. It is a disgrace. There is a reason why you were the former governor of New York State, and you will never hold elected office again. I yield back.
I now recognize Ms. Dingell from Michigan.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of order. I believe the rules of decorum prohibit applause and boos and other expressions during a hearing.
The audience will please refrain from applause or other voices of concern from the audience.
This weekend in Florida as well. On Friday, we kicked off early voting, and Americans started to cast their votes in the most consequential election of our lifetime. The American people have to ask themselves one important question. Are you better off today than you were under President Trump? The answer is a resounding no. Because people understand our nation is in crisis. Kamala Harris and far-left Democrat policies have threatened the American way of life, making our nation weaker, less safe, and less prosperous. With 4 years in office, Kamala Harris has failed to deliver results for the American people. We had the strongest economy in history under President Trump, the most secure border in modern history, and a peace-through-strength foreign policy that brought global security. President Donald Trump is the leader the American people need to bring them out of the crises created by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Look at where we are today. The highest rate of inflation in my lifetime. And Kamala Harris was the deciding vote for Joe Biden's Inflation Expansion Act. The most wide open and dangerous border in modern history, in history of our country. That's because Kamala Harris failed as Joe Biden's open borders are. And take a look around the world. You have the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, where Kamala Harris was the last person in the room with Joe Biden. You have Putin invading Ukraine, and of course the deadly terrorist attack against Israel on October 7th by Hamas. Lastly, since this is a political press conference, I want to touch on the bombshell report from the Associated Press. In key targeted districts across the country, Democrats are illegally interfering in elections by recruiting shadow candidates to deceive voters and disrupt the will of the American people. These are blatant and unconstitutional attempts to undermine our democracy and election integrity. And we are joined today by two of those districts that the Democrats have illegally targeted. That's Congresswoman Jen Kagan from Virginia and Congressman Zach Nunn from Iowa. These are amazing members of Congress and combat veterans who represent districts where these Democrats are trying to undermine elections and are undermining our elections. And these districts have been directly impacted by far-left Democrat policies of Kamala Harris as well. I want to first turn it over to Zach Nunn from Iowa. Good morning. The American people are relieved that President Trump is safe following the unbelievable second assassination attempt in a period of weeks on his life. We as House Republicans extend our gratitude to the hardworking law enforcement officers who are working to keep President Trump, his family, and his team safe. However, we have to ask ourselves how this was possibly allowed to happen, not once, but twice. How were there two assassination attempts on President Trump in as many months? How were these armed and dangerous individuals allowed to get so close to the former president and current Republican presidential nominee and likely next president of the United States? And I want to point out, Democrats' violent statements have fueled this, like a very junior freshman member of the New York delegation who said about President Trump, he should be eliminated. It is uncalled for. You should call the Democrats out in the media for fueling this violence against President Trump. There must be a clear explanation of what happened this weekend in Florida, as well as answers for what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, and changes must be made to ensure this does not happen again. That's why we're so proud that the Speaker set up that committee and broadened it from not only the investigation into Butler, Pennsylvania, but also what happened this weekend in Florida as well.
I'd like now to recognize Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Biden-Harris Department of Education FAFSA disaster has harmed students and families, in many cases irreparably, across the country. My office has spoken with many families in northern New York. They are concerned about the fallout and downstream ripple effects of the FAFSA delay, including talking with parents worrying that their child's scholarship will be revoked as they try to afford college. This is on top of the historic inflation crisis that is painful for families with an average median income in my district of about $45,000 to $50,000. And we know this problem was avoidable, and this misstep has led to the largest declines in applications coming from low-income students, in some cases removing the opportunity for those kids to go to college. So I want to focus on the GAO investigation and just to verify some of the findings here. While the department claimed that it took an average 15 to 20 minutes to fill out the FAFSA application, the investigation found that it took a two-parent household an average of 9.5 days to complete. Is that correct?
That is correct for parents that filed their taxes separately. It took 9.5 days.
9.5 days. Nearly 3/4 of calls to the department's call center went unanswered in the first 5 months of the rollout. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, it is.
And the department inexplicably cut its call center staff compared to the previous year, and they, in fact, ended up receiving twice as many total calls. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The department also refused to provide students information on the status of their applications or solutions to technical problems for months, telling many to just, quote, try again later. Is that correct?
That is correct.
This obviously is very, very frustrating for families. My question is, what students and families were hurt the most by these FAFSA delays?
It was the lower income and middle income families. Families that have wealth, that do not need federal aid, could care less about the FAFSA. It didn't affect them. They could pick whatever college they wanted to. But for everyone else, which is most Americans, it was extremely difficult. And the folks that were hurt the most were the most low income. For the independent students, that was individuals making $30,000 or less, had the steepest declines in FAFSA submissions. For dependent applicants, thinking like high school seniors, it was for families with incomes between $30,000 and $48,000. So these are the families that are being affected. These are the families that need education to help achieve an economic future.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you.
Hello, New York! I have a message for the mainstream media, and I can say this as a born and raised New Yorker. New York is Trump country! Wow, it is incredible to be here in the iconic Madison Square Garden. President Trump has been talking about this rally for years, and what a way to kick off the final week of the most epic campaign to save America. Every election, we say, is the most important in our lifetime, but this one really is. No matter where you go, whether it's in New York City, upstate New York, or in any of the swing states, people understand there is so much at stake. And it is we the people, when we vote for President Donald J. Trump, we the people will save America. Just look at the crises that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have brought to our nation and have brought right here to New York. The border crisis, illegals swarming our streets, taking billions of our hard-earned taxpayer dollars, all because Kamala Harris is Joe Biden's open border czar. She owns this border crisis. She created it. Or the inflation crisis, the highest rate of inflation in our lifetime. And you know who was the deciding vote for Joe Biden's Inflation Expansion Act? Kamala Harris. And the crime crisis. Democrats are the party of defund the police, and Kamala Harris has turned her back on our men and women in blue. New Yorkers, support our police. We will always back the blue. And then take a look around the world, what is happening. You had the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan. Kamala Harris was the last person in the room advising Joe Biden of that horrific mistake. You had Putin invading Ukraine, and then just over 1 year ago, we had our most precious ally, Israel, under attack from Iranian-backed Hamas terrorists. And Kamala Harris has turned her back on Israel. And what did we see? What did we see on our college campuses? We saw a skyrocketing of anti-Semitism. Let me ask you all, did you see that committee hearing with those college presidents, now former college presidents? That's right. I asked the presidents of Penn, MIT, and Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct? And one after the other said, it depends on the context, and the world heard. You're fired. 5 have been fired, so many to go. And you know, compare that with President Trump. He brought us the most secure border in our nation's history. He brought us the strongest economy. He proudly supports our law enforcement, and he has and always will stand with Israel. Donald Trump has fought for us, the American people. Whether it was fighting against the sham impeachment, which I was a proud member of President Trump's impeachment defense team, whether it was standing up for election integrity, or whether it was facing the witch hunts by New York's own Tish James, Alvin Bragg, and corrupt judges. You know, after we fire Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we're going to fire Kathy Hochul, Alvin Bragg, Tish James. You're fired. As I said, President Trump has fought for us. It is now our opportunity to fight for him. And New York, we made history when we fired Nancy Pelosi once and for all and flipped those 5 congressional seats. We need to make history again. So 9 days, flood the polls, vote for President Donald J. Trump to save New York and save America. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.